darker, but they tasted fine. It's a multimedia event. Ready? Well, I'm going to start. Okay. He's our pledge leader, so I needed him to get back. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting for May 21st, 2018. Please join Councilmember Pilch in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barnes.
Somewhere.
Councilmember Moss.
Yeah, here.
Councilmember Pilch.
Present.
Vice Mayor Nason.
Here.
Mayor McQuaid.
Here.
And Councilmember Barnes is here.
Okay, ceremonial matters, 3.1, National Emergency Medical Services, EMS Week, and Emergency Medical Services for Children's Day. Is there somebody to collect that proclamation? Okay, we'll go ahead and read it, Vice Mayor.
Proclamation in recognition of May 20th to 26th, 2018 as National Emergency Medical Services Week and Emergency Medical Services for Children Day. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the dedicated EMTs and paramedics of the Albany Fire Department provide exemplary emergency medical care and ambulance transportation to the citizens and visitors of Albany, and whereas the Albany Fire Department personnel are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, and others. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Albany City Council hereby recognizes the week of May 20th to 26, 2018 as National Emergency Services Week with the theme EMS Strong, Called to Care, including the designation of May 23, 2018 as Emergency Medical Services for Children Day, and encourages all Albany residents to recognize and honor the dedication of those who provide day-to-day life-saving services in our community.
We also have a proclamation for National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And before I present the proclamation, I do have a few words to say. Once again, Albany is grieving with a community that most of us have never visited, have no connection with, or probably ever heard of before last Friday. But Santa Fe, Texas is forever in our memories, along with Parkland, Florida, Columbine, Colorado, and Newtown, Connecticut. There is little that makes us different from these communities. There is little that keeps us from becoming the next news story. But there is one thing each of you can do now. If you have any guns in your home, please keep them unloaded and locked securely in a gun safe. If your child is having a play date, ask the other parents if they have firearms and how are they stored. This simple step is critical to keeping children safe and reflects our commitment to keeping firearms out of the wrong hands and preventing the tragic events of gun violence. We will adjourn our meeting tonight in memory of those killed in Santa Fe, Texas. And we do have a proclamation. City of Albany proclamation in recognition of National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Whereas every day, 96 Americans are killed by gun violence, and on average, there are nearly 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be killed by guns than people in other developed countries, and whereas protecting public safety in the communities they serve is the mayor's and city council's highest responsibilities, and whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from dangerous people, and whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later, should now be celebrating her 21st birthday. And whereas to help honor Hadia and the 96 Americans whose lives are cut short and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June 1st, 2018, the first Friday in June, as the 4th National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas we renew our commitment to reducing gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now therefore be it resolved that the Albany City Council declares the first Friday in June, June 1st, 2018, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and honor and value human lives. Let me take this. Thank you so much. Thank you. And would you like to say a few words? Sure.
Good evening. My name is Anna Santos, and I'm the legislative lead of the East Bay chapter of Moms Demand Action. And I'm really grateful to be here tonight. We're really grateful to the City of Albany for issuing this proclamation and for being a part of the Mayors Against Illegal Guns Coalition. Given the frequency with which we're confronted with gun violence, including the most recent shooting this past week in Texas, it's more important than ever that we're speaking up and using our voices and the tools that we have to bring awareness to this epidemic. By issuing this proclamation, the City of Albany is publicly declaring its commitment to public safety and to reducing gun violence in our communities, and we're very grateful for that. As Mayor McQuaid said, every day, 96 Americans lose their lives to gun violence. Our country averages nearly 13,000 homicides every year. This year, on National Gun Violence Awareness Day, Moms Demand Action, along with the City of Albany, honors and remembers all victims and survivors of gun violence. Together, we believe that we can and must do more to prevent this gun violence. I was a high school student. My high school was 20 minutes away from Columbine. I was a sophomore in high school, and I lost friends in that shooting. And so I'm very grateful for the City of Albany taking the time and the effort to recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next item, 3.3, is the Community Emergency Response Team graduation. And before we start, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to participate in the Albany CERT class. I want to thank firefighter Michael Rabb for his expertise and his willingness to put in the extra time to teach the class. There are many responsibilities and roles that a city government plays in the lives of our residents. I don't think that there's one that's more important than disaster preparedness. It is a matter of our actual survival during an event and immediately after, and also into the future. And I want to thank you again, the new CERT graduates, for being part of our team. There are a small number of public safety personnel on duty, especially at night or on the weekend. In a time of disaster, it will be your training and your service that will make the difference in how the city comes through the crisis. This class helped you prepare not only to protect your family, but also the broader circle in which you travel. You are the ones who will immediately respond to your families and your neighborhoods. You will bring calm to the chaos. Through your training, you are able to provide first aid, fight fires, and rescue people. What an amazing gift this is that you're giving to our community. Thank you again for your willingness to step up for the safety and well-being not only of you and your family, but for the entire community. Your leadership is truly appreciated. So would you like to come up and hand out the things?
Thanks, Mayor McQuaid, City Council, City staff. Appreciate the time. Thank you to the new CERT graduates of the spring 2018 class. They did a fantastic job. For those that don't know, the Albany CERT program has gone on for many years. It's trained many people, which allows your city to respond to disasters. Your city fire department in a major disaster is tasked with putting out large fires and taking care of grievously ill people. There's 6 of us. There's 20,000 people in Albany. So the more CERT people we can have, the better and safer we'll be as a city. So the CERT program is an 8-session, about a 24-hour class that involves learning how to prepare your home and your neighborhood in case of a disaster, how to purify water, what to have in your supply cache, how to put out small fires, how to sort injured people, how to take care of injured people, how to communicate as a team member, and how to help yourself emotionally in a disaster environment and your team members. And then on the final day, we put it all together and have like a minor house of horrors in our apparatus bay with sound and smell and just mayhem all around. And the CERT members have to come in and bring order to chaos, which is kind of, in a small way, replicating what potentially could happen in the real world. So thank you very much for CERT spring of 2018. And also, too, thank you to your families, too, for giving up, a babysitter, a husband, a wife, a mom, a dad, a brother, a friend for many hours for 2 months. So thank you very much to them, too. So if I could have Mayor McQuaid, do you want to come down? There you are. So I'm going to call, what's that?
I like sitting back here.
Yeah, right. So I'll call you guys up, and I'd like to hand you a certificate that officially recognizes you as a CERT member in good standing. And you'll always be in good standing in my eyes. So to start it off, and here's Captain John Weitzel here to hand out a commemorative pin for you. Oh, actually, you know what? Before we do the, you want a little slideshow? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll do a quick slideshow just to show you kind of what we were doing in our class a little bit here. Yeah. I'll just start at the beginning and just talk. That's okay. Is it okay if I just show slides? So part of what we were doing is learning how to work as team members. So we had to build a tower with construction paper and tape and scissors with people that were unfamiliar with each other, doing an unfamiliar task in a time-constrained environment, which is kind of the whole CERT idea, which is getting people together who might not know each other, and they have to do a difficult task that they don't know how to do with people that they don't really know. So that's kind of what this drill was here. And it's kind of like a little arts and crafts day too. So you get a couple things you get to do. Here is showing a prop that simulates a small fire that we learned how to put out safely with a fire extinguisher. This is an exercise that demonstrated how to take care of people, how to triage people, which means to sort people from their injuries into different injury categories and figure out who to take care of first and second and third and so on. And then we actually get to, that is Bill, who helped out with our CERT class this year, who is playing the part of an injured person. So we figured out how to use normal everyday household items like sheets and tape and pillows to take care of injuries. Us working on our communication skills, and then on the final day, we got dressed up in all our cool gear and went out and performed. It's kind of hard to see. We're better firefighters than photographers, as I always say. But this is CERT members here taking care of a simulated injured person. There you go. Great. So I'll call you guys up. I'll give you a certificate, and you can get on with your evening. So first, I'd like to call up Sarah. Next, Anna. Amy? Amy here tonight? Yes, Amy. Keith. Shant. Teresa. Friend. And there's some other people that were in the class too. I'll just say their names really quick. Julia, Bonnie, Samya, Rich. So it was a pretty good class. We had 16 people that eventually ended up being 13. Dawn, Nick, Jenny. Was Jenny here tonight? No. And and a special thanks to William Springer, Bill Springer, who helped us out run the class. Let's go around. Did I forget anyone? Did I forget anyone? Okay, good. I thought, not always, I try to be organized. It doesn't always work out that way, as we all know. Sometimes that happens. So thanks again, City Council, for the time. Thank you very much, CERT graduates and your family. Are you okay if we take a quick picture in front of the council members? Very good. All right, you guys, if you want to come up, take a quick picture.
Oh, my favorite son. Yeah, just come up here and stand right in front of us.
Should we
Exactly.
stand? Probably.
We'll stand. you. Okay, next we have report on action taken in closed session. Council consulted with legal counsel on potential litigation and gave staff direction. Next item is consent calendar. Calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience wishes removal of any item from the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
Yes, please. 5.5, 5.6, and 5.9.
Okay, I was going to pull 5.5, so that's good. Does any member of the public wish to pull an item? Okay, Councilmember Pilch, would you like to start on 5.5?
Sure. Just to note that this is another one of the instances where we're being asked to waive a fee, and there's no rush, but I just wanted to note again that I think we should bring this back as an agenda item in the future. That's it for 5.5.
Okay, thank you. I had the same comment on 5.5, but I also have a few other comments. One question is, are we still contributing $5,000 in addition to the in-kind contribution as an event sponsor?
Yes.
It seems to me that if we're giving them $25,000, that should classify us as an event sponsor. I'm concerned that we're giving an additional $5,000, and I'd be interested in a minute in what other council members think. In 2015, council agreed the next approval period should include additional details regarding the city's cost associated with the Stroll, the actual cost. And I'm curious if we really did this. I know there's, the last couple of years, due to sort of a changing international climate, there's been more staff time used in pre-planning meetings, and I'm wondering if that's part of the $25,000.
The pre-planning, no. The pre-planning is just part of the workday of your management team. The $25,000 is more directly related to overtime for primarily public safety, but also public works staff.
Thank you. And also in the past, we've done multi-year encroachment permits. Is this a 1 year, or how, this one seemed a little different?
The planning process has been evolving. We have every reason to believe that will continue in future years, but in this case, we think it's probably prudent just to do 1 year at a time. You know, again, the conditions that we're putting on the permits are being modernized due to the reality of the world that we live in these days. That will probably continue to change.
Okay, thank you. I guess I could say that I agree with Councilmember Pilch that we really need to talk about this as we talk about other encroachment permits going forward. And while this will be for this year, I think we need to really think about it going forward. I'm interested if any other council members have concerns that it's actually not $25,000, it's actually $30,000 that we give the Stroll. Is there any thoughts about that?
Well, I think if we are going to have a discussion, we need some broader context of how many encroachment permits we issue, how many times the fees are waived, et cetera, so we can get a bigger picture. I suspect this is the biggest one of the encroachment permits, but we do many events.
Well, I think my point is it's an encroachment permit plus another donation, and that's seems like a lot to me, but if it's the will of the council, that's great. Do you have a thought? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it in those terms. It is an event that kind of puts us on the map in a lot of ways. people that aren't from Albany, if you ask them about Albany, they probably think the Stroll if they're anywhere in the, northern part of Alameda County or western part of Contra Costa. I mean, it speaks to a larger question, does, what do we get from the Stroll? And, I think that's could be a long discussion and maybe more than what we think about tonight, but, it's certainly worth doing in the future. Certainly, I've thought for years there may be more people outside of Albany that appreciate the Stroll than actually live in Albany. If you've been to one Stroll, you sort of know that you can't find a parking place in front of your house and, all these inconveniences. But still, a good topic for future discussion. It may be part of the discussion as we go forward on changes on Solano Avenue and our kind of business plans and things.
Okay.
I like the idea of coming back and looking at an overall framework, but if this is what staff is recommending, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. 5.6, Nick?
Yeah, just the last word on 5.5. Yeah, I recommend that we, get the full context, especially the contributions that Berkeley makes to the event too would be helpful when we bring this back for discussion and how things have changed over the years. 5.6 is just a note that I requested and received, thank you, a map of the locations. It's just I requested in the future that be included as part of the agenda items for any item that has a is going to be something geographically spread throughout the city. A map of the locations, I think, would be always welcome for the council and the public on such an item. And then 5.9, I wasn't going to speak on this, but I do see that we have a corrected resolution in front of us. Is that the case, or is it just a printout of the same one that's been in the packet?
It's an updated resolution. Some of the terms have changed as this is an ongoing discussion with the county to make the agreement more amenable to the local jurisdictions. The purpose of the agreement is to ensure the city continues to have its ambulance rights. Basically, it's 201 rights. So we are basically mandated to enter into this agreement with the understanding that we will continue the discussions with the county to ensure that all cities under this agreement are fairly represented.
Okay, and can you tell me what has changed in the version that we have on the dais here?
The term has changed from 1 year to 5 years.
Oh, okay. Any other substantive changes?
That's the substantive change.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, is there public comment?
Yes.
Just as long as item 5.6 was pulled, I want to take the opportunity on behalf of Albany Strollers and Rollers to express thanks to the city and to staff, and particularly commend Public Works staff for putting out an engineer's estimate with a bid that came in under the estimate. I know it's a tough bidding environment, so I see that, and the organization sees that as a huge success, and looks forward to this first round of post-measure P1 repairs going out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So hearing all that, I will accept a motion to accept the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Hold the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries. Good of the city. Good of the city is a time for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note, city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or future agenda. Do we have speakers?
Yes. Elaine, Jeremiah, Francesco, and Preston Jordan.
Okay, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff. I just want to say Albany is a great city. I love living here. The reason I'm here today is because Guild Tract Farm, I've been told, it may be hearsay or not, that it's under danger of being shut down by the UC Regents. And I went there today, and they were all children playing with agriculture and bugs and hauling barrels and having fun. And it brings a lot of life to Albany. So it's a beautiful place. So I'm just hoping that keep it open. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, City Council. My name is Jeremiah. I graduated Albany High School in 2001, and for a few years, I've been trying to make a positive suggestion to the city to get what's called school zones to add to our municipal code book. And I think it would be a great addition to the city because if we get the school zone in our municipal code book, then we can apply for the state school zone grant, and which will give the city 10 paid crossing guards. And right now, our city only has 6 crossing guards. And if we get school zones, we'll get an additional 10 crossing guards to the city to make schools safer for our community. And that would obviously add money to our budget. So if we could get some sort of reading or some sort of city council recommendation for this item to be put on an agenda for school zones, I think school zones would be very beneficial to our city. And also with the school zone grant from the state of California, not only will we get an additional 10 crossing guards to our 6 right now, we'll get an additional $100,000 for Public Works to repaint crosswalks, to make them brighter, and to put up more fluorescent signs around schools. So I think school zones would be a great addition to our city. I graduated from Albany High School, and definitely the thing to do after graduating from Albany High School is to go to college. And 100% of my graduating class went to college. That's just what Albany is about, is schools. And I really think that school zones would be a great thing to add to our municipal code book. And if you don't know what school zones is, school zones refers to the DMV handbook, drive slower in a school area. Right now, the slowest speed in Albany is 25 miles an hour. When you drop your children off at school or pick them up after school, it's still 25 miles an hour. And UPS trucks and big trucks don't get speeding tickets till going maybe 30 miles an hour. There's no such thing as a 15-mile-an-hour zone in Albany around schools for safety. Only can we achieve that with school zones to be added to our municipal code book. Please think about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here representing APRA, the Albany Property Rights Advocates, and we appreciate the time you have spent working on the rent review ordinance. Despite our concerns about the program, we have also consistently done our best to collaborate with the council to develop a workable program. But it appears the council will adopt the most harmful aspect of the entire proposal, and that is empowering the city to deny rent increases by any owner who does not give proper notice of the mediation program or participate in it, either acts intentionally or by mistake. Whether or not you believe that this element is or is not rent control, It is harmful and counterproductive. The alternative, a fine, is so much more effective. Rent increase denials are likely to see legal challenges in one form or another. A reasonable fine is unlikely to result in litigation. Denial of a rent increase makes the city an arbiter of disputes, not a mediator, more a regulator rather than a conciliator. A fine is far more easy to implement. It is not a legal but an administrative action and can simply be sent in the form of a bill which can help fund the program. Rent increase denials will inevitably lead to frivolous mediation demands by opportunists. Reasonable fines carry no such risks and won't cause the program's resources to be unnecessarily strained or abused. APRA is prepared to continue to work with the council staff and others to help create a sensible mediation program. But we cannot support a penalty that runs counter to every aspect of what mediation is and actually supposed to be, and everything that we stand for. It is our position that rent control, if this happens, will have come to Albany, despite your protestations otherwise. APRA is prepared to ask our membership and the public to oppose this program if we don't get this fine installed instead of the denial of rent. APRA wants to work with all the stakeholders to implement an ordinance that can maintain more affordable housing for those who truly need it. A fine is easier to implement, poses no potential conflict with Costa-Hawkins, less likely to be challenged in court, avoids litigation, saves the city money, which we can do. It's a win-win-win-win-win proposal. I hope you can adopt that instead of the rent denial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. About 2 months ago, the council considered a presentation from the Charter Review Committee regarding ranked choice at large voting. I'm a member of that committee. I'm not speaking as a member of that committee tonight. I'm speaking as just a resident of Albany. That presentation also talked about the potential for ranked choice at large to lower the risk of Albany being forced into by-district elections, so being divided up into 5 districts under the California Voting Rights Act. In the ensuing deliberations, there were some statements by council members that being divided into districts might reduce the number of uncontested elections in Albany. And so I took it upon myself to go to the Secretary of State's website and pull the last 20 years of election data to test that hypothesis. Over the last 20 years, 1 out of every 6 council elections in Albany has been uncontested. If you look at districts that would have the same number of voters approximately, which is a little less than 1,000 to 2,000 voters, depending on what's going on at the top of the ballot, the rate of uncontested elections is indicated is going up to 1 out of every 3. So it would actually degrade democracy pretty substantially to go to district elections. For those of you that speak statistics, this is significant to the P equals 0.05 level, which is to say significant and very likely that this effect would occur. There's also a statement that the school board may not have known what it was doing in itself, voting unanimously, asking this council to transition it to ranked choice at large, or at least to put that measure on the ballot. Over the last 20 years, 1 out of 3 school board elections in Albany have been uncontested. The data from the state indicates that would go up to 2 out of every 3, so it would double, which means it would pretty much decimate democracy for the school board to go to districts. That result was significant to P equals 0.01, which is, say, very significant, even more significant than the council. And so at the minimum, I asked that at least one of the members who voted against proceeding on the district's request please bring this back to at least give the district and the board the respect it's due in at least putting its request into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that it? Any other public comment? Okay, council member reports on meetings attended, announcement of future meetings, city manager report. Let's see, we'll start with Michael. Anything? Pete, you had something?
Yes. On the 14th, I attended the Programs and Projects Committee meeting. There were essentially three things on the agenda. One of them dealt with Highway 84 going into 680 and wasn't particularly relevant to Albany, I don't think. But the two others were. The first was about the San Pablo Avenue Integrated Corridor and trying to finish up that whole plan, which, if you're not familiar with it, essentially channels traffic off of 80 if it's backed up onto San Pablo. And the other was the Gilman interchange, which was essentially anointing the final agreed upon plan, not in detail, but the basic plan for the Gilman roundabouts. A little editorializing here. I found those two agenda items sort of in contrast to each other. The San Pablo Avenue Integrated Corridor is something that it came down through our Transportation Commission, Contra Costa and Caltrans, and it was very much focused on keeping traffic moving on 80. At the same time, they're initiating a San Pablo review about making that how we're going to put on rapid transit bus lines, bike corridors, et cetera. So there were two programs that I think are pretty much at odds, given that you can't fit all this stuff on San Pablo Avenue. And we'll see how that works out in the future. The Gilman interchange, I think, was a much more shining example of the way the planning process needs to go in this county, because it involved all the different groups, and it took longer and it was very complex, but it came up with something that I think finally bikers and motorists and all the concerned parties could agree with. So, I find that interesting, and I think it shows that the Transportation Commission is in need of kind of transitioning from this idea that it's all about moving cars and more about the effect it's going to have on people.
Okay, thank you. Nick, do you have anything?
Yes. So we attended the mayor's conference last Wednesday, or a week and a half ago. We also both attended, the mayor and I, the Affordable Housing Week kickoff. And I attended the EBCE meeting, and we'll be talking a little bit more about EBCE items tonight, but let's see, we discussed the budget, and the consensus was that giving dividends to ratepayers was not a good way to spend surplus funds, but instead spending money for more local projects out of surplus funds was a better idea. And also there was some discussion about spending extra money on making sure that we would do the best job of retaining customers from the get-go. We approved residential rates, which is kind of late-breaking news because this happened after the packet came out. So the residential rates have been approved and set as, I'm looking for Dan here. It's a 1 penny per kilowatt hour above the PG&E rates the same as the commercial rates that we approved with the addition of the new product, which is the 100% renewable product, which is priced at 1 penny per kilowatt hour above the PG&E prices, so at that premium price. And I think that's it from the meeting. The chair and vice chair were reelected. Also, I attended a film on yesterday, which honored, a part of which honored Jewel Okawachi and her contributions to the city. It was about the Japanese internment during World War II. I think that's it for me.
Okay, Rochelle?
Well, along with you, Nick, the Barbara Lee event.
Oh, yes, of course.
Our Congresswoman pulled together a panel, and most of us were there, and our mayor was the master of ceremonies for the evening and performed spectacularly, as always. I was also at the film about the internment of Japanese citizens, which was a very dramatic and disturbing documentary, very good. I attended the environmental roundtable at the East Bay Regional Park District, as well as a number of local environmental organization meetings to talk about Albany waterfront issues and encourage support for the council's policy direction on managing the bulb. I also attended a couple of internal meetings on conduits, providing access for modern technology, and also with the police regarding several issues. And for future issues, I wanted to bring people's attention to the community meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd at 7 o'clock at the Senior Center. We'll be talking about the safety issues for people who are traveling back to Albany or anywhere along the way from the El Cerrito Plaza BART station. So we want to look at the Ohlone Greenway and its alternatives.
Great, thank you. In addition to what's already been said, I participated in a climate mayor's conference call, attended with Vice Mayor Nason, the Alta Bates Task Force meeting, participated in Bike to Work Day, well, handed out supplies at Bike to Work Day, and attended the Economic Development Alliance spring meeting. I stopped by yesterday to see Play Like a Girl, the rec department example of all kinds of girl sports that they had at Memorial Park. And this afternoon, I had the honor of speaking at the Albany High School Unity Rally. Do we have a city manager's report?
A couple of quick items to note. I've received the resignation of our police chief, Mike McQuiston, who will be moving on to an ambitious new career as a faculty position at a local community college. We will make sure that we wish him well and have some ceremonial events to recognize the police chief's over 20 years of service to the city of Albany in the police department. Also, the city has signed on to a brief to support sanctuary cities as the state of California continues to fight against the federal government with this regard to support both sanctuary cities and the policies that are connected to those. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to 8.1, School Crossing Guard Program Update. May we have a staff report, please? And I guess the police chief's already gone off to college. You're still employed here, you know.
My apologies, Madam. I got cornered in the lobby talking about Sanctuary City and lots of other things. All good. Thank you. Again, I apologize for my tardiness.
No problem.
As council is aware, the city's school crossing guard program will not be fully funded for salary and benefit costs beyond the end of the current school year due to a loss of revenue. The staff recommendation before council tonight is to fully fund the crossing guard program for the next fiscal year, 18-19, in an amount of $82,000 to maintain 6 crossing guard positions and provide direction to staff on funding sources for the program, such as the possibility of funding a portion of the program with proceeds from the sugar sweetened beverage tax. And an additional recommendation that council directs staff to undertake a comprehensive school safety assessment to include gathering traffic data and developing a warrant program for crossing guard placement in the future. These recommendations allow us to maintain our 6 current crossing guard positions through the end of the next fiscal year and provide staff with time to gather information and conduct study that would conceivably allow for proposal of alternative crossing guard program models for further consideration. Background briefly is, as council is aware, at the close of the last school year in June of 2017, the city employed 6 guards as permanent part-time employees with 2 guards assigned to each elementary school. Under the terms of a memorandum of understanding with UC Berkeley, 2 of those guards were paid for by UC Berkeley and provided to the Ocean View School under their previous obligation to provide that. Because of the favorable structure of that MOU, those revenues received from UC accounted for approximately 54% of our annual crossing guard budget. And because of a loss of funding from UC, we had ended up with a loss of about 50% of our budget for this. In July of last year, council will recall, you authorized interim city funding necessary to fully fund the program through the end of the calendar year 2017 and directed staff to work with UC Berkeley and the Albany Unified School District to secure some temporary funding. Staff was able to negotiate a commitment from both UC and from the school district to contribute one-time supplemental funds that would allow us to remain at full staffing through the end of this school year, which will end about June 15th of this year. And each of those agencies has stressed that that was a one-time commitment and they will no longer be able to contribute funds to the program costs. As a result, either increased city contributions to the program or reduced program staffing levels would be needed to continue the program in its current form. Council in November, at your November 21st, 2017 meeting, expressed interest in gathering more data and information as well as some interest in exploring a warrant method for determining where crossing guards should be posted in the city. And one of the things that I suggested during my report on that date is that perhaps I could take some information to the Traffic and Safety Commission before bringing the issue back to the City Council. I did appear before the Traffic and Safety Commission on April 30th of this year and gave a presentation on the school crossing guard program outlining challenges with administering the program and presented possible strategies for addressing some of those current challenges. I also shared with the Commission an intent to recommend that the Council maintain our current staffing through the next school year. I explained to them that the police department tried to gather some data on crossing guard, the amount of traffic being used at crossing guard intersections, but what we've found is that it's really difficult for us and kind of outside of our wheelhouse to do really good data collection for something like that, counting pedestrians and the movement of cars at intersections and things of that sort is really not our expertise. And so we ended up with some data that was really not very useful to us, I didn't feel, and really incomplete. Consequently, I also told Traffic and Safety a little bit about crossing guard warrants as described in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the MUTCD. We also discussed the option of contracting with a vendor to provide these services and the potential for the city to conduct a school safety assessment that would include elements such as a review of the crossing guard program. Let's see. I do have some information if council is interested in hearing what any of those things might look like, either crossing guard contracted services and or a review of school safety as part of the transportation element of the city's general plan. At that meeting, the Traffic and Safety Commission took action expressing full support for the full staffing of the crossing guard program, and they recommended that council actually consider a ballot measure to fully fund the program. I certainly don't speak for the Traffic and Safety Commission, but my general sense that night was that they, their intent is that they wanted to encourage the council to secure a funding, a steady and secure funding stream for the crossing guard program. So at present, under the temporary cost-sharing conditions that I described, the crossing guard program will continue to be fully staffed through the end of the current school year. However, neither UC or Albany Unified School District will contribute any funds beyond that date. Our program is what I would call a legacy program. It hasn't been really subjected to a significant review of how it operates, how it functions, and its structure. That has not occurred for decades, none that I am aware of. And a thorough review of alternate guard program models and analysis of current conditions through the previously mentioned school safety assessment might be helpful in making future program funding and procedural decisions. Under funding options in the staff report, given that funding from UC and the Albany Unified School District is unavailable at this time, the council may wish to identify alternative funding sources for the program. And as previously noted, traffic and safety is also interested in that. In addition to the idea of a ballot measure, the concept of utilizing funding from the sugar-sweetened beverage tax was raised by the council during previous discussions regarding the crossing guard program, particularly given that safe routes to school can help encourage healthy habits such as walking and biking. On February 5th of this year, council approved an expenditure plan for the sugar-sweetened beverage tax and directed staff to incorporate the expenditure plan into the upcoming budget update to be presented to the council on or in June of this year. There's an attachment to the staff report that includes that document, that expenditure plan. The current plan is proposed at $200,000 and includes a combination of one-time costs associated with the installation of water bottle filling stations, and as well as educational and physical activity programs to encourage healthy lifestyle habits. It is anticipated that the overall annual revenue from the sugar-sweetened beverage tax will be approximately $285,000. So the fiscal impact of maintaining the 6 current crossing guard positions through the end of the next fiscal year is approximately $82,000 for salary and benefits. That does not include our other administrative overhead costs, such as our workers' comp insurance, program administration, payroll, the use of police personnel to cover vacancies, hiring, fingerprinting, that whole backgrounding process that we like to do to get clearance on these guards, et cetera. Next steps, pending direction from council, staff will incorporate the 6 crossing guard positions into next fiscal year's budget, the budget update that will be presented in June to council. In addition, staff will begin the research and planning to conduct a school safety assessment if council so desires, and those findings would be presented to the council in 2019 in advance of the next budget cycle. With that, as I said, I have more information if there are specific questions from council regarding the recommendations, and I am here to answer those questions.
Are there questions from council?
I have a couple. Who does contracted services for something like this? Are there, what kind of organization does that?
There's actually a crossing guard company. It's All City Management Services. They have a website, thecrossingguardcompany.com, I believe is their website. It is a big part of their business model. They do that. There are some local agencies that contract with them. I believe, actually tried to access their database tonight before the council meeting, and it's for their clients only, to see their list of clients, but I happen to know that Pleasanton and I think the city of Alameda and a few other of our neighbors contract with them, but they are a large company that has, I was speaking with an officer from, former officer from Placentia in Southern California who said he had contracted with them when he worked there a number of years ago. So they've been around and are apparently pretty commonly a vendor of those services.
Do you have any ballpark as to what that might cost?
I do. So I've previously inquired with them how much that may cost a few years ago, and I asked them to brush up that particular bid. We're probably looking at, again, this is kind of non-binding guesstimate, but it's about $124,000 for the 6 guards at 4.5 hours a day, which is what we currently staff for, which would leave us about $43,000 short of what I'm asking for you to budget.
But our number, the current number, does not include the time that you spend, the time that officers are called out to fill in when someone can't take their shift. There are a lot of collateral costs that I think are probably not part of that 82,000. Is that
That's correct. We have not sat down to quantify those numbers, but those are real numbers that are there. In conversation with this vendor as a potential sole source vendor for these services, they use an analogy of an iceberg. It kind of at the top has your salary and benefits costs, but beneath that there is a huge amount of costs that are typically not calculated in making these decisions. And there's also one that's kind of a little more intangible, and that is that we're not always able to cover. It's a drain on our resources when we have to cover, but frequently we're not able to cover that, and then you end up without a crossing guard.
If the vendor didn't show up, if, let's say we contract these services out, are we still, or is the police department still on the hook for sending somebody out there under that situation?
Not the way I understand the way we would structure this, no. They cover their vacancies. They maintain staff to cover vacancies. It's similar to contracting for a private security service to watch your building overnight. It's their responsibility to make sure there's a body there.
Okay, and conceivably some kind of fine or something if they didn't cover it, or some money transaction. I'm not sure what that would be. How much has it gone up from year to year, the cost? Is there kind of every year, is it an extra 5% or some percentage? I mean, what did it cost 10 years ago and versus?
I don't know. So your concern being we get into the contract and then it goes up 10%.
Well, it would be true for either one. How much was it costing the city of Albany to have 6 crossing guards so many years ago, and what's that costing us now? If we go for contracted services, it costs X, but, do they have to raise their prices every year or so?
I don't know. I would assume that as wages rise, that they would have to be competitive and have people fill those positions.
Right.
To pay a wage that would minimally attract people to fill them so they can meet their obligations. So I honestly, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
So can you talk a little bit about the safety evaluation? And one of my concerns is the schools are they know they're doing something with 2 of the elementary schools. I'm not sure that there's a real solid, able to tell us exactly what they're doing. And I'm wondering the value of doing a safety evaluation in such a time of flux for them.
I think, without talking about the details of how that would be done, I think it could cut either ways. It could be a waste of time to look at what's happening at a school before the school undergoes, a renovation or worse, that changes all the traffic patterns and impacts other schools that maybe we're not looking at. So it could be unnecessary in some cases, or by the time it's complete, things have changed, or it would have to be redone if you do it in anticipation of construction and rerouting of vehicles and pedestrian traffic and whatnot. It would only be good for the duration of that change, that temporary change.
Yeah.
It may be, again, that's a little outside my wheelhouse, but it may be something that you wait until it's more static to do that. But
And that would come out of community development, the transportation department? Is that correct?
yes.
And so if they're doing that, and it seems like it's fairly labor intensive, what are they not doing? Always my question, what are you not doing if you're doing this?
So I assume you're looking toward the audience, but
I'm looking at
the
Jeff.
question is directed to me.
I'm sorry, I was looking at.
Jeff's not on the microphone. I'll let Jeff respond to that.
Well, to answer your second question first, which is that, yeah, we're always balancing our priorities of what we work on, although this is a youth-oriented community and our schools are very important to us. So the school safety is one of the first things we think about when we prioritize projects and bring you projects in the CIP. I do think that this is something that we should do. I don't like the idea that we are just kind of always reacting to suggestions about where to invest funds, and it feels like this is one of those situations. I'd rather take a broad look citywide and make sure that we're putting, if it's 6 crossing guards, we're putting them in not necessarily 2 at each school, but putting them at the places where there is the greatest danger to the students. There will be a big change in the way the schools are functioning, particularly with the middle school. We'll have essentially a 3-way intersection in the middle of a middle school with middle school kids crossing back and forth, hundreds of them every day. That right now doesn't have an adult crossing guard as part of that proposal from the school district. I'm very concerned about that situation. And that may be a higher priority than putting crossing guards at the elementary schools where, generally speaking, there are adults who are accompanying the kids to school. Not always, but generally speaking. And then we've made some significant investment in intersections next to Marin School and Ocean View School in the last 7, 8 years or so. And we haven't done a full kind of post-project evaluation of how they're functioning. And I think that would be worthwhile to make sure that they're functioning as intended. And all that can get folded together into a comprehensive plan on how do we best spend time and money and personnel to protect schools, so students going to schools. And I think that would be a worthwhile investment of the city's resources to make sure that we're putting money into city streets that serve the community.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, Nick, go ahead.
Sure. Actually, glad we had this discussion. A few other questions came up for me. Warrants. What can you tell us briefly? What is the warrant for a crossing guard look like in the manual?
So let me find that here. One of the things I was going to point out about if these services were to be contracted, actually even if they're not contracted for, the idea of having a warrant is really helpful. It helps make the decision a little bit more maybe a fiduciary decision when it needs to be made, because if it warrants it, then it's not necessarily a visceral, I want my crossing guard kind of decision. So there's not a, well, the MUTCD, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, Chapter 7D, is titled Crossing Supervision, and it describes what might be called a warrant process, basically what they call criteria for adult crossing guards. I think if I were to just kind of read this verbatim, I don't know that would serve much of a function. I'm happy to provide it to council, but let me skip through it and maybe I can paraphrase parts of it and give you a sense of it. It says, first of all, it talks about 3 different types of crossing guard supervision: adult control of pedestrians and vehicles by adult crossing guards, adult control of pedestrians and vehicles by uniformed law enforcement officers, and student and or parent control of only pedestrians with student and or parent patrols. And it largely refers to something referred to as the AAA School Safety Patrol Operations Manual as kind of where to look for organization and administration and operation of a school safety patrol program.
Is that the private organization, AAA, or no?
Yes,
Okay.
yes it is. They apparently wrote the manual on having a a school safety patrol program. So granted, that's something slightly different than crossing guards, but that's kind of where that falls in here. So for adult crossing guards, it says adult crossing guards may be used to provide gaps in traffic at school crossings where an engineering study has shown that adequate gaps need to be created and where authorized by law. And it references the following section on where gaps need to be created. It goes on to say adult crossing guards may be assigned at designated school crossings to assist school pedestrians at specified hours when going to or from school. The following suggested policy for their assignment applies only to crossings, and then it provides guidance. An adult crossing guard should be considered when special situations make it necessary to assist elementary school pedestrians in crossing the street. And interestingly, it does say elementary school, and that is our program is an elementary school crossing program. We do not and have not provided guards to the middle school or the high school. It goes on to say a change in the school crossing location. Again, an adult school crossing guard should be considered when a change in the school crossing location is being made, but prevailing conditions require school crossing supervision until the change is constructed, and it is not reasonable to install another form of traffic control or technique for this period. It goes on into the criteria. It gets into specifics as to the number of pedestrians in any number of hours that are crossing an intersection, crossing a public highway, daily use going to or from school. And it's permissive in saying adult crossing guards may be used under the following conditions. And it describes, for example, at a stop sign controlled intersection, at a stop sign controlled crossing, where the vehicular traffic volumes on undivided highways of 4 or more lanes exceed 500 per hour during any period when the school pedestrians are going to or from school. And then it also gives a breakdown for uncontrolled crossings and for traffic-controlled crossings. So it's a very kind of a methodical approach to that.
Okay.
And it goes on to qualifications and describes what uniform and things of that sort, operating procedures,
Okay.
so on.
Thank you. That gives me a good idea. So there are criteria that have been used for assessing this, the need for crossing guards. I think that's it for questions for now.
Any questions? I have a couple more. If we were to take the $82,000 from the police department budget, which is a bump up, I think, from where it's been, am I correct in that?
Well, I think it is a little bit, because I think I did a better calculation on it before I came to tonight's meeting to really lock it in. I got it from our HR director, what the salary and benefits cost was.
Okay. I guess my question was, if it's significantly more, is there something that you're not able to do because more of your money is going to crossing guards? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Are we taking money from somewhere else in the police department budget?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. And then my other question, probably more than Nicole, we did have the study session about the sugar sweetened beverage and have an idea, shall we say, of what to do. We're not locked into that. We can make adjustments as we see fit before we do the budget.
Right, it's an ongoing funding source. You're obligated to have a study session each year per that ordinance that was adopted by the voters. The council takes that into consideration and then makes decisions.
So we can, until we do the budget, make any choice we want.
Sure,
Okay.
yeah, and even thereafter, the budget could always be amended.
Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone on council? With that, I will open it to public comment on this particular item. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes, we do. Preston? Oh, sorry, 8-2. Jeremiah.
Hi, good evening, Chief and City Council. We jumped already to 8-1. Before we start 8-1, I tried to get my public comment, and you said that the chief is going to resign, and I just want to get an open public comment to the chief resigning. I just want to say from public comment, I believe you're the greatest chief Albany has had. I think you're a great chief, and I think this city would be sad to see you go, and I don't know how you'd be replaceable. So Albany's got some big shoes to fill, and well, words can't describe right now. It just really hasn't hit me yet. So
Thank you, Jeremiah.
and
Thank
so
you.
okay, so here we go. So 8-1. Thank you. I would like you to describe. You did very well describing the paid crossing guard. If you could just describe 1 second about the uniform. I was really looking forward to. I knew you were going to get to it, but you stopped right when you were going to talk about describing the uniform requirements for the uniform officer. And I think that would be great because one of the things is in the requirements you were reading that a uniform officer is a possibility, and we don't have one right now. I think if you could look into a uniformed officer, just at least one uniformed officer as a crossing guard, that would be great to show some leadership, and there'd be someone from the police to go to, and not just volunteers or some outside source. There'd be an actual uniformed police officer that's in charge of the police crossing guard program, and you would also create a job for the city as well. And so a few things on this 8-1. I think it's a great idea suggested from staff. That's one of the greatest ideas I've ever heard from staff for the public. I believe this is great. And so I think that the city should fully fund this program, and you're wondering how you could do it. You could take money from the sugar taxes. Well, I have a positive suggestion. If we add school zones to our municipal code book, we can get a state grant that will give us 10 paid crossing guards. If you were to hire a company, that probably cost $300,000. And we'd get $100,000 to help repaint the crosswalks and put up more signs, and maybe even push-button LED light crosswalks around the schools. So that could be one of the possible funding portions of the program, definitely. And I think right now to maintain the 6 is a great solution than just losing everything next year. And I think if we could possibly raise it to 10 crossing guards, shoot for creating jobs, and I think just only 6 isn't enough for our city.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
You're welcome. And
Jeremiah, your time is up.
Okay, all right. The last thing is I just want to say thank you very much for working on this. Please keep up the good work. This is very important to the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other speakers? Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to council for final comments and direction.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Please.
I just want, I think it is important to say that I made the comment about the uniform, and that's the use of the wordage they have in the MUTCD. The uniform, basically, they require, that we wear the reflective equipment, that we have the bright yellow type thing, and that's their idea of uniform. And because we're conversing, and there's some conversation here about contracting out, I just want to point out that there's a consideration that those are union employees, and there's other conversations that have to take place if that conversation is going to be the way council goes. But I also did want to say with the idea of contracting for the services, it becomes very easy to upscale and downscale as long as the money is there. It's very easy to the provider and say, we need more, we need less, or we need an extra one here because of a construction project or something of that sort. It's just, again, it kind of becomes a financial decision at that point. I just wanted to make sure I got all that out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, comments from council? Michael, do you want to start?
Heard all the public comment on this?
We did?
I was just wondering why everyone's still here. Must be the last item. First of all, I want to say thanks to the police chief. My concerns about this are not addressed to the functioning of the program, but rather who pays for it and what the rationale is for why we're picking up the tab for this. And frankly, the answer is we have a dysfunctional school board right now, and the school district is a little out of control, and we're picking up the tab. And I say that as a former school board member. So and my concern is that this is not going to get any better, and I'm wondering down the road how many more expenditures we're going to be asked to pick up. So here goes. On my property tax bill, almost 25% of the money currently goes to the Albany Unified School District. Okay, so there's that money. In addition, the school district gets average daily attendance, or ADA money, which amounts to about several $1,000s per student. Also, the city, I think, has already done its job in providing infrastructure improvements like the sidewalk parcel tax, bulb outs around the schools, et cetera, to improve safety. So I think we're already doing a lot. And as of a few months ago, this hot potato was something we're going to fund for a semester and then hand off. Now we're going down the rabbit hole of funding this for perhaps a long time. I mean, what evidence do we have that in a year the school district is going to have its act together and then we can hand this off then? I'm not optimistic. The soda tax, my favorite topic. I think if when we proposed the soda tax, we had told the voters, we're going to use this to cover crossing guards, we might have gotten a different response from them. I think this is switching over and assuming we can just switch the soda tax over to covering crossing guards is a little disingenuous. And I would be more comfortable if our attorney could not review that legislation that we proposed and passed to make sure paying for soda guards, crossing guards, is consistent with what we put in the initiative and what the voters voted for. I'm just, I'm a little nervous about that. And then I just want to close with this odd irony, okay? And that is effectively what we're doing by funding crossing guards with soda tax money is encouraging our kids to go drink more sodas so there'll be more money to pay for their crossing guards. Because if they stop drinking sodas and the soda tax money goes down, there's no money for the crossing guards. So you all, if we pass this, get out there and tell your kids to drink lots more soda so they can have crossing guards.
Do you have any comments?
Okay. Yeah, a few comments. Yes, on the idea that we need to do a safety assessment. If we haven't done one for a while, it seems like something we should be doing. I would say we should be considering all sorts of things, including school zones, if that makes sense, or if that can in some way make it safer or potentially provide some state monies for any or all of this. I don't know for sure, but I certainly have heard that often enough that this is a good idea. I think crossing guards are ultimately a city function. I mean, it's the city that's concerned about traffic and pedestrian crossings and things like that, and it just so happens that these are where the schools are, so they're mostly school kids at certain times, but still I think this is something that we have to ultimately step up to. It would be great if UC would come up with more funds, but if they're not doing it, they're not doing it. And likewise for the schools. It's a little problematic, the idea for me of using soda tax revenues for this specific program. I think even though that was passed as a general tax and we could conceivably use it for street sweeping or anything, it's still, I think, the implicit promise to the people of Albany is that we were going to focus fairly narrowly on issues around sugar-sweetened beverages and the ill effects they have. Now, at some point, we may have so much money in that program that it's problematic finding new things to fund. But I just personally have a problem saying, well, oh, this is the obvious answer to this problem over here, when it wasn't. It's a little bit skewed off of what the original purpose was. So I'm hoping we can come up with other sources. Exactly what those other sources are, I'm not quite sure at this point. And if it comes down to it, perhaps the soda tax is the answer. But at this point, I'm very uncomfortable. I sort of had a question about this idea of doing a safety assessment. Is this something that could be done between now and the start of the new school year next fall? And would it be in time to come up with some answers? It sounds like something that maybe should be actually done while schools are in session. Usually these kind of assessments take a while.
You're correct, they do take a while. I don't think it's practical to do it in the next few months for us, just given the other things that we're working on. And we need to have someone out there to do the observations and traffic counts and so forth. And even now, the school year is kind of winding down with
Right.
school class trips and things. It would be better to collect the data next fall or next spring and then do the assessment sometime next year.
So in some ways, we may be doing a stopgap thing until we get some sort of assessment in place in order to figure out if there's either a better way of getting kids across Buchanan or Marin or Solano or whatever streets we think they're endangered in. Yeah, that's my general.
Okay.
Okay.
Michelle?
I have some comments. And to me, there's a short-run problem. What do we do about the upcoming budget? And there's more of a long-run issue. How does this program fit into the rest of our work as a city and into the work of our educators? And I'm going to talk about the long run first, because I think it sets the context for considering what we do in the short run. I don't see this, I see the crossing guard program not so much as just addressing the dangers of intersections. That is obviously its most important thing, to make sure people are not struck by cars. But it's also part of the bigger picture of safe routes to school, which is a program that we've been participating in for many years, have received a great deal of money to change our infrastructure, and hopefully will continue to get money and create infrastructure. But, a wise man once told me that culture trumps policy. And I think, to me, this is about building a culture of kids walking and biking to school. The scrum at the schools at the time that kids are being dropped off is a kind of awful thing to see. It's not good for the kids. It can't be good for the parents. It's not good for businesses that are near the schools. It's something that shouldn't be happening, and we should be building a culture in which, if you're driving your kid to school in a town that's, a square mile, you're probably doing something wrong, unless somebody's got an injury or something. Let's build a way that we get our kids to school walking or biking. So that's the big picture that I would want to see, is that this is a component of a program that gets kids out there. In the short run, I am going to disagree with my colleagues and try to persuade you. We don't have to make this decision now, but I would urge people to go back and watch the video of the meeting where we initially talked about the purposes of the sugar-sweetened beverage tax. There was a lot of advocacy for following the Berkeley model and making sure that the money went to dietary education, probably through the schools. And we talked about that, and I remember being very clear that we decided that given that we had no way of knowing if the Sidewalk Parcel tax would pass, that it was very important to reserve the discretion to use that funding to address the most dangerous of our sidewalks if that was necessary. That was an explicit purpose in our discussion. We kept the parcel, we kept it a general tax, and we talked about the fact that because it was general, we were not going to follow the Berkeley model, but keep it as something that there would be wide discretion. To me, for the short run at least, it makes all the sense in the world to look at this coming year and use soda tax, use the portion of the police budget that would otherwise go to this, which I think is probably something like $35,000 to $40,000, and the rest from the soda tax. I think that the use of outside contractors makes all the sense in the world. We're going to have a new chief who will have much more important things to do in coming in as a transitional matter than dealing with crossing guards. Since it's not just a safety issue, since it is a healthy kids issue, over the long run, we'll be looking for somebody other than the police potentially to be managing this. But in the short run, contracting it out, hopefully the crossing guards that we know and love will be able to transition and continue their jobs. And we could facilitate that. But that's my long run and short run suggestions.
Thank you. Nick?
Okay. I do want to put out there one idea that I have ever since I learned about the middle school annex construction, which is that there's a model used in Berkeley right now around the Berkwood Hedge School in which part of the street is gated off during the school day. And I urge everyone to consider this idea on the street whose name I'm blanking on right now. Brighton, to gate off the portion between the annex and the middle school so that through traffic during the school day.
Before we close the road, let's stay on the agenda.
Understood. I understood. I just want to, I'll stop on that wonderful idea right now. So hear about getting kids to school walking and biking. Absolutely. To address the comments about school funding, I am dismayed that the school district has not chosen to step up and at least partially fund this program. I believe that they should, but it should be noted that the schools do not have nearly as much control over their funding as we do. The schools depend a great deal on state funding, which waxes and wanes very frequently, and I believe that's one of the reasons why they're in a budget crunch right now. So I'm hoping that once they come out of this budget crunch, they'll reconsider contributing to this program. I really think they should. I do like the idea of the economies of scale that we get with the contracting firm. I can see where that could work out very well for them. They can probably draw on a wider pool of people to act as substitutes when it needs be, and they probably have all the infrastructure for texting and calling people at the last minute and substituting, and that frees us and our police department from having to do all that administration, which probably has a high price tag when you come around to it. Not only just the hours of administration, but the interruption and the ability to not do other things. So I do think we should keep that idea in mind. I do think that we should be data-driven as well. So traffic, whatever you call them, traffic studies, safety assessment studies, using the warrants. We need to do that. We don't need to complete that right away. I think it's fine if we get that underway, fund the program, get that underway, but we do need to reassess, as the chief said, reassess that program, make sure that the data says we're putting the right number of people in the right places. And finally, as regards to the soda tax, I am concerned about spending the soda tax money in this way. I don't think it's keeping in with the spirit of the sugar-sweetened beverage tax. I did speak with one constituent who was a signer on the ballot measure, and this person was dismayed to hear about this this possible use of the money, and this person was going to come speak tonight. I do not see this person here, unfortunately. I also did not reach out to other advocates that I met when working on this, but I imagine that they might have similar concerns. That said, I wouldn't block that funding, but I think we just need to do outreach and be very transparent about using the funding in that way. And maybe I will be very outspoken about it if we spend that money without having installed water bottle filling stations in every single public facility in this town first. And then finally, I don't understand what you stated about not following the Berkeley model, because I believe we followed the Berkeley model exactly. The culture in Berkeley was more about real direct funding of certain programs, and we were a little bit looser with our language about funding programs, but as far as I can tell, it is exactly the same model, so maybe you could speak to that.
I'm talking about the funding. I'm not saying that the other portions, but the use of funds was, we talked specifically about whether or not to adopt Berkeley's model, and we decided against it. But we can all go back.
I might have to agree to disagree on that one.
It's all on video, so we can go back and take a look. And,
not quite my recollection, but okay.
Yeah. Berkeley had a very, very specific way of allocating the funds, using educators and having very specific goals and objectives. We did not.
Yeah, I would say that's true, but I think I agree with Nick. I think those of us who worked on the sugar-sweetened beverage.
As did I. Yeah.
But my recollection, and also in our other discussions, is that we wanted this more oriented towards, questions of kids' health over
kids
sweetened
walking or
beverages.
biking to school is very much a question of kids' health, though. It is. Yeah. It is part of the equation.
Okay. All right.
My turn. Yeah, I think that what we were looking for in the sugar-sweetened beverage was promoting healthy lifestyle, and I totally agree with the Vice Mayor that walking and biking to school does promote a healthy lifestyle, and it's a lifelong learning thing for kids, that they understand that they can get places without being driven, and I did a little bit of research on it last night, talking about, educators saying the kids that come to school by walking or by biking are more ready to learn, they're more engaged, they see more things as they're getting themselves to school, they're more aware of their surroundings. So it's all in all a better thing for the children, rather than just being put in a car and driven to school. And I think it does meet the sugar-sweetened beverage goal of healthy lifestyle. I think this is our program, whether we appreciate it or not. I think that it is ours, at least for now, and we need to own it and take care of it. Let's see, I think somebody mentioned we've spent a lot of money on sidewalks, both through our sidewalk tax and through other infrastructure improvements we've made. This is just another piece of that, making Albany more walkable. I think we should fund 6 crossing guards. I'm just a little bit concerned about the safety study. I think it's a good idea. I'd just like to have it firmed up with the school district, what they're doing as we go forward, so that they're a part of it and we're not studying a site that's under construction, or that, I just think it needs a little bit more thought. I think doing it's the right idea. I just think we need to think about it before we jump in. So I would support using the sugar-sweetened beverage. I think we should contract it out, is the big piece of this. I think the way we're doing it right now isn't working. It's inefficient. It's expensive. So I would like to see us use sugar-sweetened beverage probably to fill in the gap between what the police department has in their budget for it and the cost of outsourcing it. I think that's a good use of the funds. It's not a whole lot of money. Obviously, the water bottle fillers, I think, are given that we're going to do. There's money for both. I think that's the way that we ought to go. I think Rochelle was correct in her comments. So what do you need from us?
Depending on the interest of the council, if there is an item that the council would like to see regarding the potential of contracting out the service, staff should return to the council with the parameters of that, what the actual estimate for services is, and any implications that has on our internal negotiations with the SEIU organization.
Okay. And Craig, do you want to say now or think about are we totally off track on this sugar sweetened beverage?
As a legal matter, it was structured as a general tax, so the funds are not legally restricted. The ordinance does require an annual study session to receive input from a variety of sources on potential uses of the funds, but it is not legally restricted. As to what expectations might have been created among the voters, I'm not sure I can speak to that.
Okay. Okay, so I think it's safe to say the council is interested in hearing more specific information about contracting it out. And
did I hear these two other things that I might have heard consensus on? A safety assessment at the appropriate time in the future.
I think that's a fair way to say that.
And I would be okay with using the sugar sweetened beverage tax with filling in the gap, as the mayor mentioned. So if we're on a consensus, if we're looking for consensus.
What I would say is if the guesstimate at the moment for contracted services is $124,000 and the police department's coming up with, I've heard, $35,000 approximately now, are those numbers in the ballpark?
So the number that we have in our budget is based on the original anticipated revenue from UC Berkeley, which was, I believe, about another $36,000 on top of that got us to the original $72,000, I believe. So I can pull those numbers up here. It'll take me a minute to get the accurate numbers, but so our budget assumes that revenue was coming in. So that revenue stream is not going to be there. So the money to fully fund it is listed in our current budget, but the revenue to fully fund it is not there. Does that make sense? That $36,000 is not coming in?
So we'd have to fill in the $36,000 plus, if we contracted out, any additional funding beyond the 86 or whatever it is in the staff report.
So
Why don't we schedule a agenda item that includes an updated estimate for what it is to contract out, as well as some refinements to our existing budget and the potential loss in revenue that may need to be covered by an additional funding source?
Well, I don't think it's a potential loss of revenue. I think there is no revenue.
It is a loss of revenue, yes.
I don't think potential.
So we will refine the numbers with that crossing guard company and present that to the council in June.
Great.
And when you do, it would be great if we could see what the sugar sweetened beverage tax expenditure plan would look like. I was a little bit perturbed, actually, looking at the materials that said, that we have an approved expenditure plan. That was not my recollection. I thought that we looked at the expenditure plan and people had concerns, particularly, there was going to be the $50,000 on an artistically appealing water fountain, and there were just various things that people had a lot of concerns and reservations about, and I think that our direction was for staff to come back to us with more information, more estimates and so forth, taking the comments that we made into account. But again, it's on video, we can all go back and look at it. But in any case, I think that a revised sugar-sweetened beverage tax expenditure plan should accompany this.
Yeah, we should, staff can verify that. My understanding was both, that we actually did approve that plan that staff brought forward, and we said we have a lot of other things we'd like to do too. Next time around, this is going to look very different. That was my understanding, but staff can verify.
Right, that's how it looks in this report.
Yes, that is what occurred. And basically, the return to the council for additional review is intended as part of the June budget update, but we can certainly provide that as part of the continued discussion on this item as well.
Thank you.
And do we have any updated numbers on the revenue for the sugar-sweetened beverage tax from what we had
Yes, I actually have that
originally?
in front of me. To date, we have almost 291,000. I'll pass that to the council, and I'll also put some copies in the back of the room.
Okay. Okay, that all sounds good. So does that give you, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just a brief comment, because I don't want to rehash the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, but I just want to clarify some issues. Like Berkeley, we went for a general fund soda tax because if we wanted to put it into a special fund, it would have required a supermajority vote of 2/3. San Francisco tried that, and they lost. So both Berkeley and Albany decided to do the safer thing, which was put the money in the general fund, then you only need a simple majority to pass the tax. Berkeley is bigger than us. They have a bigger lower income population. They have a real public health department. And so they actually have existing programs and infrastructure to do public health with their revenue from the soda tax. We don't have anything like that. And in addition, as I pointed out at the time, we have the lowest rate of type 2 diabetes in the county. So we don't have the same kind of problems that Berkeley has. But the whole idea with the soda tax, and I've discussed this with some of their analysts who now seem very reticent about showing us their numbers, is that the soda tax ought to wither away over time. That if you're doing it right and you're educating the public, the soda tax revenue should be going down because less people are drinking sodas. I suspect in Berkeley that's not happening, and from the numbers I just saw here, it's not happening for us either. My concern is you're locking in as a funding source a revenue stream that ought to be declining over time to fund a program which is getting more expensive if we're going to start outsourcing it. So, you know, your costs are going like this, and ideally your revenue would be going like that. So we're just setting ourselves up for a problem long term. Just saying. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, and with that, you have enough direction for us to move on?
I'm sorry, if I may, one more item. Since we're going to rediscuss this and bring it back, can't we go and talk to the school district one more time and see what their opinion is, or get them to pony up some money?
I actually took the liberty of engaging with the superintendent on the matter, and my understanding at the current point in time is that they have some significant funding issues, and this one just isn't on the table right now.
My concern is, you know, we're playing chicken with the lives of our kids. We're like, you know, everybody refuses to pay for this program, and we're the ones picking up the tab because we're generous. You know, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. That's all.
Okay. Chief, did you want to say something else? Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Okay. So moving on to 8-2. Partial tax to fund improvements and maintenance of city parks and open space. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, this is a continuation from the presentation the council received at your last meeting regarding the voter polling services for potential revenue measures for the November 2018 ballot. As you received information as part of that discussion, there is general support for the extension of a half-cent sales tax. as well as the possibility of a parcel tax to fund the maintenance improvements of parks and open space. Again, the council has been discussing this item since November of last year as a substantive discussion of any parcel tax that would be on the ballot. I'd like to reiterate that this parcel tax is being proposed because of the current landscape light assessment district 96-1, where the bonds from that measure will be repaid in 2019, making the levy at that time not recommended. So this is an update to that parcel tax and an adaptation thereof. I'd like to introduce Tim Seufert from NBS Consulting, who is here this evening and has been patiently waiting to provide a presentation to you. Tim will walk us through the overall tax structure model and some options thereof and answer any questions you may have.
Great. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to be pretty brief, and you might recall hearing some of this information, albeit in a more general form, 18 months ago, 24 months ago. In any case, I would just have a couple of slides, so if we could advance to the next one. There we go. So anytime we're talking about a parcel tax, an assessment district, all the different tools in the toolbox, the first thing I say is, what are your priorities? I think you all have had a lot of discussion about that. But you really need to have that discussion about what you want to do, what's your policy, what's your priority, before you choose the tool. Oftentimes people go right to the tool first. We want a X tax or we want a Y assessment. But really, this is the way the order of it should be. We're talking about a parcel tax in particular. So next slide, you could do that, okay. You know what, you might as well just click on all those. It might be a little easier to do. So this is the way I try to lay out the metrics of a parcel tax. Is the first thing, it doesn't need to be benefit-based like an assessment district, like a landscape and lighting district or what have you. It needs to be based on some reasonableness and reasonable metrics and something that anybody can explain and understand and achieves obviously your goals. The mechanism is a parcel tax mechanism, which is open to all 482 cities in California to use, and obviously for you as well. You already have some parcel taxes, so you're familiar with it. The approval process is still 2/3 approval. There's been talk of reducing it to 55% or 50%. But if you're watching this measure that's going to be potentially on the November ballot, everything's going to be 2/3 if that does get some traction, the Tax Fairness and Transparency Act that's gathering signatures. So 2/3 approval for all intents and purposes at this point. And the types of projects you can approve, you're pretty familiar with: school districts, parks, maintenance, open space, all that kind of thing. So that brings us to the numbers. Hopefully, it's fairly legible. Not too bad. This is two examples. So we have our, example A, if you will, is the top table, and the B is the bottom table. There's a number of different ways to do that, but in the discussions that we've had with Nicole and your city staff, try to keep it simple. So the first one of these, well, the goal is obviously to raise approximately $450,000, right? So the first one is simple in that every residence would be taxed $59. So single-family home, condo, et cetera, all the same, $59. The small non-residential, so commercial, mom and pop, small parcels would also pay $59. And that equates more or less, depending on the average of those small parcels, to about $300 an acre for the largest commercial properties. And you do have, a couple of very large ones and then sort of some in the mid-range, which gets you to the $450,000 for this sort of example A, which, given our conversations, I would tend to favor this one from what I know. Obviously, I don't know everything that you know, but the second one is a little bit more along the lines of some of the taxes and the existing landscape and lighting district, for that matter, in that multifamily residentials have a slightly lower rate. Right? So you have single family at 59, and then the multifamily and condos and that kind of thing at $49. And then the smallest commercial parcels are back at that $59, equating to the single family. But then you'll see that to make that work, to get to 450,000, the per acre charge goes up fairly significantly from the 300 to 479. And that again generates about $450,000. It really kind of comes down to what you think. Again, has to be benefit based like an assessment district. This is really, a choice. And it really sort of depends on your thought is that, does a single family residence and a condo generate the same amount of need and appreciation and use of parks and open space? That's a question I necessarily can't answer for you, but I guess this poses that question by deduction. So that was really the extent of what I wanted to share with you in our conversations to date, and answer any questions that you might have as you think about this. And I understand that the direction is just to ask for direction to move forward, but not necessarily to make the complete decision and wordsmith the 75 words this evening.
Are there questions from council?
Okay, I'll ask one. So what we're talking about, to get this clear, is a replacement of our measure R. This is the new R +1 or something. In the old R, part of that was field development, and in the new version, it seems like it's more around field maintenance. I don't know why I got that impression reading through that, but is that?
Well, yeah, if you look at the staff report, the ballot question that was tested by Godby Research basically is maintain and improve park and open space. So we would have to look into exactly what the ordinance language said, and that would be the next step, is developing that ordinance language, which really defines the purpose of the tax.
Right. I mean, as you know, and I've said before in this council, I would love to see Pierce Street Park used for something other than a big grassy field for dogs to go do their business on. And that would cost, that's going to take some money. And this seems like it has some potential, if this were to pass, of providing for that. Other comments?
Other questions over here?
Yes. First of all, for our staff, did we receive electronic copies of the polling firm's presentations? I believe they said they would, but I don't recall receiving them.
We did.
I thought I sent it.
Okay, I
think it came a few days after. But.
Okay, I could very well have missed them, so thank you for that. Do you recall, and so not having those in front of me, do you recall when we did the polling, was it at the $59 rate? Was that the question used by the research firm?
Yes, and the intent behind that was that it's basically $10 less than the current LLAD, for a single family at least, which is $69.
Okay. And can you remind me again why $10 less rather than at the current rate?
Basically just looking at what our overall cost needs are and making it as reasonable as possible for the voters.
Okay, thank you. So can you either of you tell me more about keeping the structure simple? When we did one of our last parcel taxes, like the sidewalk tax, it was much, there were many more tiers, it really struck me how simple this was. Can either of you speak to why one would go this simple?
I think there's a couple of things you might want to mention, but the main one that came up was we looked at we got pretty granular in the size even of single-family residentials. In other words, to really derive to how much sidewalk you had, where this is, more access to parks and open space and that kind of thing. So it's certainly a different purpose, and it's meant to be a little more, flat, I guess you could call it, almost more of a flatter tax across the board. But I don't know if that answers some of the earlier discussions, but.
Okay. Yeah, pretty much says it all. Okay. Thank you. And so it seems like landscape and lighting districts and that particular tool is getting a little poo-poo these days. I understand that one of the facets of this tool is that you have an engineer come in and do a benefits analysis, and then that determines how you levy your tax. Is another benefit of the landscape and lighting district that you can actually build in increases to the levies over time? Would you say that's another benefit?
Well, either a parcel tax or an assessment can have an inflator.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Either one, it's legal to do that. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Typically, it's CPI or something. It's been fairly nominal for the last few years.
Okay.
But no, you could build this in. I don't believe that was discussed with the original polling, though. Was there an inflator? Don't
We need
recall.
to check the polling. What we would basically recommend is a CPI adjustment per
Okay.
year, just to keep with current times. It's very standard for a tax measure. The other thing I'd like to note is as the question was tested with the voter polling, it includes a low income exemption, and that would be something we would build into a more robust terminology through the ordinance as well, similar to what we established for the sidewalk parcel tax.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say the landscape and lighting districts, that sort of tool is a little, people shy away from it a little bit because of the extra cost of the engineer and the complication of it? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I'll try to keep it really brief because I'm part of kind of a statewide group that we jokingly call ourselves the assessment evangelists, because we're trying to keep assessment districts alive and make legislative changes so that they aren't sued as often as they have been. But an assessment district does have more constraints, if you will. It has assessment engineering, and you have a lot of things that you need to do. They're still vital. We're still forming those districts, but certainly parcel taxes in the CFD, right, the Community Facilities District, which is basically a parcel tax of sorts, have been much more popular over the last 10, 15 years.
Okay.
But they're both still a valid tool.
Okay, great. And I think that does it for my questions at this time. Thanks.
Do you have any questions? I just want to clarify, so I'll put it in the form of a question. When we talk low income, we're also talking renters. Is that correct?
You certainly could, yes.
As in the
similar to the sidewalk.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Can I make some comments on your charts? Could you scoot over? Thank you. About the complexity, really what we've done here, if you notice, there's only one line for residential on the top chart, and what we've done is disaggregated it into 3, and then we are charging less for condos and multifamily residents. We're dropping them down from 59 to 49, presumably because they're lower income, I'm not sure. But then you make up that shortfall by charging the big non-residential much more money per unit, from 300 to 479. So it's actually, they're very similar. The question is, are we trying to reduce the burden on lower income people who potentially live in condos and townhouses and apartments, and then have the big non-residential pick up the slack? That's fair, you think?
mean, it is.
I mean, that's a fair assessment of what those charges mean.
Right, this is a non-uniform parcel tax, which 50075 allows you to do, essentially, being a city. And yeah, you could argue a bunch of different ways, but yes, we're looking at it. It's not uncommon to have certain parcel taxes have multifamily at 60, 70, 80, 90% of a single family rate. But, you know, in some of our discussions and thinking about this, you could argue that somebody that lives in a multifamily situation benefits more from open space because they don't have a backyard like a single-family residential unit would have. So it depends, you know, it's sort of like, do you come at it from an income approach or do you come at it from a benefit approach as to, you know, which one of these makes more sense?
So if we add some kind of adjustment for low income, how would that work vis-a-vis, say, the disaggregation in this bottom chart? How would we determine how we adjust the rates?
You know, a discount or a rebate, basically, you wouldn't necessarily need to adjust these, you know, the rates, right? Because they're set, but you would have an administrative program to reduce those.
So my question is, looking at the bottom chart, we're sort of double compensating for income. If the reason we're going from 59 to 49 is because presumably condo, townhouse, and multifamily residential tenants, occupants have lower income, then we're double compensating because we're also going to build in criteria for low-income folks anyway. So that's just something to think about. I mean, we could then, if that's the case, go with a simpler structure up on the top.
Other questions from council? I'll open it up to public comment. And Rehab.
Hello, Preston Jordan, switching hats to the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. Thank you for considering this item. And the League asked you to make sure, and saw in the staff report that there was a suggestion of an exemption for low-income property owners, but also to the mayor's point to include the rebate for low-income renters. And to expand on that a little bit, since that wasn't included in the staff report as a default or even mentioned, your strategic plan, I believe it's strategy 2.1B, asks for the development of a low-income tax policy that, depending on what was adopted, would then hopefully guide the city to make consideration of the inclusion of these provisions standard in the development of these measures, so it's not ad hoc and requires somebody remembering either on the days or coming to the podium. I believe that strategic plan runs through January of 2019, approximately. I think it was adopted in January of 2017. I'm not aware of any public reports on the pursuit of the development of that policy. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but if there have been no steps taken on that, I would ask the council to inquire with staff on the status of the development of that policy. And in tandem with that, strategy 2.1A specifically regards marketing the existing accommodations for low-income households more effectively. So in the past, the utilization of those has fallen, 90% behind the utilization of CARE, which is the state low-income power program. And so even though the voters passed measures with those provisions and obviously intended for those to be effectively implemented, they're not reaching the target population. And so there was a strategy 2.1A was to more effectively market those. I'm not aware that the number of households that successfully utilized those provisions was reported last year. I looked through the Social and Economic Justice Commission agendas, and there's nothing in there. And so I would ask that you have an annual report on that, because what you don't measure, you can't figure out if you're making progress on. My understanding from more informal reports in previous years was that the marketing initially doubled the uptake to about 70 households from 35 before that. Total number of households is about 600 that's low income in the city, and that's excluding households in University Village. but that fell back to about 40 because the city, for whatever reason, changed its form to require substantially more paperwork from applicants. And so the hypothesis was that caused a sort of a retraction or rescission of the number of households that were going after that. So I think the council would be advised to pursue that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Preston, it does say in the staff report, low-income residents. It does not say property owners. So
But it talks about an exemption, not a rebate. I believe it uses the word exemption and not rebate, and
Right,
exemption is only
it's-
applicable to property owners. Exemption does not apply to renters, so it implies that it's only considering property owners. And I raise that because in the sidewalk measure last year, it was the council's intent that rebate be included. Fortunately, staff shared the language that was submitted to the registrar with me, and rebate was not included in that language, and staff was fortunately able to go back and look at the record and then change that language and resubmit to the registrar and get it in just under the wire, but we almost missed not having rebate in the Measure P1. So I really please ask council to pay attention to this on behalf of the League of Women Voters. Thank you.
Okay. And the other thing is, just for your, I don't know if you saw this, the yellow postcard that went to every household in Albany, right, talking about the rebates, exemptions, everything that's available. Is that correct?
Yes, it's sent citywide each year.
So that's about the third year. The first year that was done, as I said, the uptake went up to about 70 from 35. The following year, those cards were sent out and it dropped back down to about 40. And I don't know what it was last year, but we're still very far off the target of how many low-income households there are and what PG&E is able to achieve with its care program. So I think there's more work that needs to be done there. A low-income household living in a very low-cost unit right now is paying about twice the percentage of its income in taxes to the city as a non-low-income household. So our tax structure is completely upside down.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Any comments?
I have a thought, and it relates to the last hearing. One possible institutional home for a really robust Safe Routes to School program would be the Parks and Recreation Department, which has a lot of experience with education, experience with volunteers, experience with kids. You know, there's a lot of things that would go into Safe Routes to Schools that really are more of a Parks and Rec type of approach. And it would surely, I think it would be a help to a parcel tax if it included, and I think that it was mentioned that some people were talking about including a parcel tax for crossing guards. If people are uncomfortable with the long-term use of sugar-sweetened beverage taxes for this purpose and concerned that sugar-sweetened beverage taxes are going to fall off, it appears to me that there is room, based on the staff report, to consider additional programs, and if so, perhaps a robust Safe Routes to School program could be part of this. It's just a thought for staff to noodle on.
Any other comments?
Sure. So I guess I didn't really have a chance to weigh in on the polling, but I wish we had polled around the $69 rate rather than the $59 rate, essentially the amount that people are paying right now, rather than a reduced rate. It seems like if people are okay with paying it now, they would be okay with that in the future. But I guess that ship has sailed. So I do hear and agree with the sentiments that we should make sure we keep the low-income households in mind with a rebate, not an exemption. I do think that the city has stepped up with its marketing of the low-income the possibilities for exemptions and rebates from the low-income households. I applaud that and I agree with that. But gathering data on how effective that is also would be good as well. And then as far as the structure goes, I guess I do feel like I'm a little bit persuaded by the income-based model where the multifamily resident units and condo units are taxed at a lower rate. But I wouldn't be opposed, I guess, to the other model as well. And I think that's all I have of substance right now.
Well, I think the rates should be the same because when I think of condos and townhouses, I think of Pierce Street, and when I think of open space on Albany Hill, I think those are the people that are close to Albany Hill. The same with Pierce Street Park. So I think, and I'm not sure we have data that says that the people that live there are necessarily more low income than single family homes. I'm not sure that we have that data. And as long as there's a low income exemption rebate, however it's worded, I think that solves that problem. And so I would like us to go with, I don't know if we can call it level A, but the top graph on the chart, the 59 and 300. That just makes more sense to me.
I would lean to keeping it as close to the existing structure as we can get. And that would include the amount. I think this is continuation of an existing tax.
Yeah, I too would go with that. The city needs, I don't think, shrink that much over time. And as I'll say one more time, I'm hoping that perhaps out of this, and there'll be a need for other funding sources also, but eventually we can complete Pierce Street Park in a way that's beneficial for a lot more kids. However it can work for low-income families to get a break from all this would be great. I don't want to say, I know there are low-income families still in Albany, but I suspect that group is also shrinking over time, and there's no need to kind of push them out completely if we can.
So does that give you enough direction for moving forward?
Yeah, I should also add, as part of the voter polling, we tested the support if the amount went down to $49 per single family residential, and it didn't affect the support level to a significant degree. So
okay.
On the converse of that, if the council is interested in continuing the same rate, which is basically $69 per single family resident, I would like some direction on that so that we can make sure that in your next review of this, including draft ordinance language, we incorporate the appropriate model.
So we don't have a low-income exemption or rebate for the current LLAD, correct? Or the current Measure R3, whatever it is?
No, we do not.
Okay, so we would, if we kept the same rate and add the low-income considerations, we would be already improving things. So I certainly would be in favor of keeping the same, keeping the rate at the 69 rather than the 59, if that's what I'm hearing from other council members, and also the CPI adjustment as well. Or is that a consensus?
Yeah, we could maybe look at what it would look like.
Sure, yeah. The next step in this, based on the direction received, is that staff will provide a draft ordinance for the council to review. Again, that will basically be a ballot measure, not that you'll be adopting that ordinance. And it will include the proposed tax model. And you'll still have an opportunity to make more changes to that as we're working ahead of the curve here.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, where are we? Okay, that brings us to 11-1, Resolution 2018-63, requesting East Bay Community Energy enroll residential accounts in the Brilliant 100 product. May we have a staff report, please? I'm working on it.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. The action before City Council is to approve a resolution requesting that East Bay Community Energy set the Brilliant 100% carbon-free product as the default electricity product for all residential customers. Just as a quick reminder, the Climate Action Plan calls for 25% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, which is coming soon, and the general plan calls for even more ambitious goals. Staff has been working to advance climate action through a number of CAP initiatives. Albany's Climate Action Plan identifies community choice aggregation, or CCA, as a priority for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. CCA allows public agencies to procure a greater percentage of electrical power from renewable sources on behalf of electricity customers, while energy transmission, distribution, repair, customer service, and billing continue to be administered by PG&E. Customers retain the choice to continue to purchase power directly from PG&E by opting out of the CCA. City staff and the Sustainability Committee have been evaluating CCA for many years, and the City Council approved a JPA agreement to join the East Bay Community Energy Program in November of 2016. And EBCE is now getting ready for a June launch to its commercial, industrial, and institutional customers, including sending notices and conducting outreach to large commercial customers. City Council approved 2 resolutions to opt commercial customers and municipal accounts into the Brilliant 100 product back in March. And residential accounts will begin service through EBCE in November of this year. Renewable energy includes solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and small hydroelectric power. But from my understanding, EBCE's renewable electricity portfolio currently includes solar, wind, and small hydroelectric power. Just as a reminder, the carbon-free energy definition includes renewables plus large hydroelectric power. So EBCE now has 3 products. The board approved the pricing for the third product last week. The Bright Choice product is 85% carbon-free and is at a 1.5% discount from PG&E's current rates. The Brilliant 100 product, which now commercial and municipal accounts are enrolled in as the default, is 100% carbon-free at the same price as PG&E. So the idea is customers won't see a difference on their bill if that's the default product. And now there is a new 100% renewable product priced at 1 cent per kilowatt more above PG&E, which is an average of $3.77 a month premium. So that's the idea with that. Important to note with residential customers that EBCE is committed to honoring PG&E's special pricing programs, such as CARE, FARA, and medical baseline allowance programs. These customers will receive the same discounts that PG&E currently provides. So if they're automatically enrolled in the Brilliant 100 program, they will be paying the same amount that they're currently paying. If they're enrolled in the Bright Choice program, they would have that 1.5% discount, which on an average Albany bill is about $7 savings per year, so significantly less than $1 per month savings, because the 1.5% discount is just on that electricity generation charge. So the Sustainability Committee discussed these power mix options at their meeting on February 21st and recommended that City Council direct staff to work on creating the 100% carbon-free product as the default for all Albany customers. And Brilliant 100 is not projected to have a financial impact on customers because it's the same price as PG&E, and customers can always opt down to the Bright Choice option to receive that discount, or again, opt out to stay with PG&E. So our recommendation today is to opt residential accounts into that Brilliant 100 carbon-free product. and I'm happy to take any questions. We also have Dan Lieberman of EBCE here today as well to answer any questions relevant to EBCE.
Thank you. Are there questions from council?
I just have one. As I recall, the issue was PG&E's default energy supply is now higher than 85% carbon-free. Is that right?
We believe that's the case. I think that there's not accurate data from PG&E yet to know what that mix is for 2017. So the last data we have is for 2016, but it's been increasingly less carbon each year. So that we can make a guess that it's. I think EBCE staff shows the 85% number with a guess that PG&E's carbon-free content is similar, but we don't know yet.
Is this a private choice, or is there a social aspect to it of when a person makes this choice? Is it in any way a public decision?
I believe that it's a private choice, but I think Dan can speak to that. I know for commercial, we can't get that information about businesses' individual choices.
Hi, Dan Lieberman with EBCE, an Albany resident. It's a private choice. If a customer chooses to opt up or opt out or opt down, in that case, it's information that they share with us. Councilmember Pilch is on our board of directors and has signed an NDA, so I can share the information with him, but it would still remain confidential information.
Would we, as a city, know a percentage of people, like 3% opted out? And could we know not who, but how many? Is that possible?
Yes, so I'll be preparing a monthly report for our board, which will also be posted on the web, that will have opt-out statistics by town or territory and opt-up statistics. But we're also bound to the 15-15 rule that utilities are subject to. So at this point, Albany has 15 or fewer opt-outs. So I can't report that number until, for example, it's exceeded 15. So I can disclose some information, but it's so early yet that there's very little that I can disclose that's public.
But we were providing an aggregate number for all of EBC, I think at one of the last board meetings, for the opt-outs, correct? And it was very small?
That's correct. As of today, we had 175 opt-outs on over 50,000 accounts that we've noticed, so very small.
Are there other questions? Any questions? I'm not even sure how to ask this question, but we did have a letter this morning about time of use, I think is a good way to describe it. Can you talk a little bit about how that works? Is that
time of use rates?
Right. The point was that in the evening, and Nick, you might be able to jump in easier here, evening and nighttime use of electricity does cause carbon emissions, but they're offset. I'm not, and I understand about the duck curve, Michael, you don't have to do the duck thing again. But could you explain a little bit more?
I think I understand the question, but let me know if I'm misinterpreting. But I know there's been some confusion around, for example, having a 100% renewable energy option. If we're sourcing it from intermittent sources, how can we guarantee that power will be on at that hour or that we're accounting for it properly? And I guess I should explain that as a load-serving entity, we do need to match our supply with our demand. So we can't buy solar only and serve 550,000 accounts. There's a very small percentage of customers who are going to be served, at least initially, by this 100% renewable energy product. And so we're matching that product on an annual basis with supply, not on a minute-to-minute basis. That's the same with Brilliant 100 and with Bright Choice. They all need to be matched for accounting purposes on an annual basis. However, we do need to match our overall load in real time. We're not guaranteeing right now that we're serving all of our power with renewables or all of our power with intermittent sources. Most of our supply is going to come from large hydro, and that can be generating power 24/7. So I guess I'll start there and see if that's sort of where you were going.
Thank you, that helps.
Okay.
Any other comments? We'll open it up to public comment. Thank you, Dan.
I have Eric Larson, Nick Peterson, Jessica Day.
Hi, my name's Eric Larson. I've been an Albany resident and homeowner for almost 22 years now. And so, first of all, I wanted to say thanks for your service to our community. It's really great to see the City Council and to interact with you. Over the last 10 years, I've been really interested in climate change, excuse me, and have taken personal interest in getting more educated on climate change. And I went to the Al Gore Inconvenient Truth climate reality training, and have since then come and spoken with my friends, neighbors, community on climate change, and really trying to advocate for educating and taking personal and local action. I'm also a member of the recently formed Albany Climate Action Coalition, which is a group that has been helped formed by the Sustainability Committee. And through that, I've become more educated on the East Bay Community Energy plans, and have had an opportunity to discuss it with Sustainability Committee members, as well as East Bay Community Energy representatives. And so based on the information that I've gathered, I would strongly recommend that we adopt the Brilliant 100 as the plan for the default for the residents of Albany. I think that we rarely get such a good deal in climate change and fighting climate change. Being able to adopt 100% carbon-free with no rate change to the residents is a really good deal. And so that's why I would advocate for taking that on as the default for Albany residents. I do know about the 100% renewable plan, and I think that is a great option. And I would like to see City Council investigate in the ongoing in the future a way to implement that in our city. And I will be personally advocating my friends, neighbors, and community for opting up. But I know that there's about a 10% chance of people opting either up or down. So that's part of the why I'm advocating for the Brilliant 100 plan. I think that this is a great opportunity for Albany to take action and really lead by example in the East Bay and the Bay Area. I think our federal government is really taxing us with going the opposite direction, and I think that this is a great opportunity for Albany to lead by example. And I'm proud to be an Albany resident, and I encourage you to adopt the Brilliant 100 plan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council and staff. My name's Nick Peterson. I'm also an Albany resident, and full disclosure, I'm on the Sustainability Committee. I'm here to encourage you to pass the resolution directing EBCE to make Brilliant 100 carbon-free electrical the default option for residents and customers in Albany. I feel strongly that this is an important opportunity for Albany to reduce carbon emissions. My understanding is that this will not affect accounts, as we've just seen, won't be any extra charge, and also the low-income care programs will transfer over into what EBCE also offers. It also will not increase nothing is perfect, and I realize that the Brilliant 100 option includes power from large hydro. In fact, it's heavily dependent on it. But this is a starting point, and what is the advantage of going with EBCE is that they're committed, and they're an opportunity for us to promote and push for more sustainable energy. The impacts of climate change are on us now, and we have continued as a society to just kick this problem down the road, so we need to take decisive action now. I realize there are risks, and yes, PG&E has improved its blend and energy sources to become more sustainable over the past decade, but PG&E cannot commit to the fast conversion now needed to achieve the rapid reduction of greenhouse gas emissions required to arrest climate change and anything approaching what is needed now. Embracing EBCE 100% brilliant is the best way for us to meet our 2020 goal of a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below the 2004 levels. And this is a, this is the primary objective of our climate action plan. Relying on PG&E just will not do this, so we can't rely on that. Along those lines, I understand, and this is 100% sustainable came up, and that's really great. I mean, I like it. We could go that way, but my big concern there is that we're going to be putting this in as a default. A lot of people will, even with our best opportunity to educate people, a lot of people will find it out on a bill, and knowing people in Albany, some will be very disgruntled. In fact, I think a large majority, if they got opted into something higher, and there would be more of a risk for them to just say, I'm out, I'm back to PG&E, in which case we don't get them for bright, brilliant, or anything. So thank you very much for the opportunity to voice my opinions. I think Albany is continuing its successful efforts in becoming a truly sustainable city and standing behind the City of Albany's mission statement of providing a safe and healthy and sustainable environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
After Jessica will be Joby Emmons and Preston Jordan.
Evening. Thanks for having me here. It's my first rodeo at City Council, so it's really nice to meet everybody here. I'm sure everybody on City Council knows that nearly 50% of Albany homes are occupied by renters, and I'm one of them. But I'm also somebody who cares deeply about the environment and climate change, as are many residents of Albany. But I find as a renter that many of my environmental impact choices have been made for me. And I find that frustrating. There's natural gas in the house that I'm renting. I can't control how efficient my home is. These are choices that impact me every day, and I don't get to make a better choice. So one of the things that I want to be able to trust is that I get access to carbon-free energy by default. And I think that the Brilliant 100 default is one of the first and probably last times where I will be able to make a great deal of impact on the environmental carbon footprint that I'm leaving without having to do anything or pay anymore. And I think that's the last time that's going to happen. So I also want to point out that I know that as part of the Albany Climate Action Plan, Albany residents are going to need to shift all of their home and transportation energies from fossil fuels into carbon-free sources. And I know that also if Albany wants to achieve that goal for the 25% reduction by 2020, that we need to get all of our Albany residents on board with it as well. And this is one of the most expedient methods to do that that's pretty painless because there's absolute fee parity. I have talked to the EBCE team, and I know that that includes the exit and franchise fees, so I feel pretty confident that it's a hard thing for anybody to feel bad about. And as Eric said, the opt-up option often doesn't happen at the rates that you want, even when voters care about the issue. I believe the rate, I looked at the average amount of time that the average person looks at their energy bill is about 6 minutes per year. It's less than 30 seconds usually per bill. So it's mostly a problem of people not paying attention, not because they don't care. So I'd really like to see the default to something that they do care about. And I do agree that the 100% renewable, I just want to mention that I'm definitely one of the Albany residents that would be happy to opt up, and I'd like to see a more aggressive energy portfolio. I know EBCE is planning to improve what it offers over time, but I'm all for being a city that leads and drives change and continues to build on its mission. So yeah, proud to be an Albany resident, and I'd like to stay that way by defaulting to Brilliant 100.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Joby Emmons, and I'm originally from Indiana. And in junior high, I had a social studies teacher that said, what did he say? Any trend that makes the world a better place came from California. And that was saying a lot for this guy because he is a proud Hoosier, and he didn't really like to say it, but he said it, and that stuck with me for a long time. So now that I'm an Albany resident, I'm excited to try to have that same effect. That said, I'm here tonight to ask the City Council to accept the recommendations to make Brilliant 100 the default electricity product for Albany residents. By doing so, you'd be doing right for Albany, doing right for California, and doing right for Indiana. And then on top of that, the fact that there will be no increase in a consumer's energy bill as a result of the change makes going with clean energy the obvious choice. So appreciate that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Preston Jordan, also with the newly formed Albany Climate Action Coalition, and I think I hear a motto there potentially for the coalition. Good for Albany, good for California, good for Indiana. So I also encourage you to pick Brilliant 100 as the default choice. I think it's probably, at this point, the only legitimate way to reach the 25% reduction goal. So keep that in mind. That will probably happen on some of your tenure, or maybe all of your tenures, whether or not we hit that goal. I do think that the 100% renewable does have some substantial advantages, and we'll certainly work to opt people up, or get people to opt up to that. However, the uptake on that from other jurisdictions that have community choice aggregation with these different products is not particularly high. I think there might be a way to default to 100% renewable down the line, and ways to manage the equity impacts of that. So hopefully that discussion can continue over the next 2 years. From conversation with EBCE representatives, they've indicated that jurisdictions can change the default in the future. I presume that is only changing the default for those accounts that haven't specifically opted from that default to something else. But there might be a possibility to go to 100% renewable in the future. It's interesting, Max Way, who's a sustainability committee member, mentioned that we all get a climate dividend, if you can believe that, on our bills. This year it's going to be about $40 every 6 months. And it's interesting that that matches exactly how much more the 100% renewable product would cost. And the state, in its guidance in providing that dividend, says, please use this to help the climate. So that could be part of this conversation over the next 2 years, which would go into an education piece. Yes, your power bill rate is going up, but in fact, it is the same because you're getting this dividend on average, and we are going to help you spend it in the way that the state intended you to spend it. We could also exempt low-income households that are enrolled in care from the utility user taxes. That would also go some ways towards improving the equity, not only around going to 100% renewable product in the future, but it would go further than that and help to improve slightly the equity, or let's say reduce the inequity of Albany's tax structure, which I should say the inequity of that tax structure isn't really Albany's fault entirely, because there's very few taxing instruments that are available to cities, and they've been put in a jam by Prop 13. But that said, I think it's possible for Albany to at least get to a flat tax instead of taxing low-income households at a higher rate than non-low-income households. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up, Max.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak and to discuss this agenda item. And I think Preston stole some of my thunder there, but that's fine. I get some extra time. So I would also like to speak in strong support of the Brilliant 100 option as the default option for Albany residents. And so one or two pieces of data that I wanted to share, which has been mentioned, is that this is really the fastest, most effective way to move forward without any additional cost to residents. So in particular, if the state or if the city were to go with the 85% bright green option, then what would it need to get to the 2020 climate target? Well, by my calculations, excluding the impacts of climate change, so this is excluding the impact of an abnormally warm winter, city residents would have to increase their miles traveled on ZEVs by 4 times, from 3% to 12%, or they would have to, half of households would have to get retrofits on their homes and to save 20% on their natural gas bills. So both of those are very, very tall orders, and I would say they would be very difficult for us to meet as a city in the next 2 years. So I definitely think that this is the most effective lever to pursue for the city to meet its 2020 climate objective. And so just to highlight again or underscore again what Preston said, there are advantages, and I would definitely strongly recommend the council to further pursue discussion for the 100% renewable option. And I think this will be an opportunity for the city to provide climate leadership and also to be an innovative player. So for example, as Preston mentioned, I don't know if any of you looked at your utility bill, but in April you should have all seen a $40 credit on your bill. And you'll be seeing that credit again in October. That's an $80 credit to every customer. Every PG&E customer and every CCA customer will get that. That value changes from year to year. So I think last year was like $35. But that is more than sufficient to offset the increased 1 cent per kilowatt hour for, I would say, 98% of the residents in the city. So that's an opportunity for outreach. That's an opportunity to try to appeal to the community to say, hey, the state is giving you a cap and dividend. Let's put that dividend toward the purpose for which it was intended, which is to fight climate change. So I would really speak strongly for that as an opportunity. One other thing is that this can set the stage for further decarbonization. So with 100% carbon-free electricity, we can start to shift to zero emissions vehicle. Those are completely clean. We can start to shift to heat pump-based heating in buildings, which is completely clean as well. So thank you again for your attention.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. I do just want to make a quick comment. As I think Nick mentioned earlier, he and I were at the mayor's conference in Oakland a couple of weeks ago, and the presenter was Nick Hassett, is that right? Hassett, from EBCE. And Albany was one of 2 cities that opted for the Brilliant 100 on the commercial and municipal rates. And it was really nice to hear that you know, it was us and I think it was Hayward were the only 2 cities, and we were like, yeah, we're the ones. Okay, any other comments from council? Then can I get a motion to adopt resolution 2018-63?
So moved.
Wait. Sorry. She was breathing already, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I do have one
Okay.
comment, which is perhaps we could include a policy, a formal municipal policy to encourage people to opt up to the 100% renewable. And then when we send out explanatory information about the program, we can include, hey, do you hate big hydro, you know, for 1 cent per kilowatt hour, you can have big hydro free 100% renewables.
Well, I'll just say, I've made my points about this. I think this whole argument is silly. I think if you talk to any reasonable energy economist, they will tell you we're not really accomplishing anything here. So I have nothing to say about this. So I'm just going to abstain because I think the choices we make tonight aren't going to make any difference.
So I want to go back to your point. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not quite sure what you're asking for. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the resolution. I'd like to add an additional whereas clause on page 2. And, or no, not an additional whereas clause. Let's put in we have now therefore be it resolved that the Albany City Council hereby requests the East Bay Community Energy enroll all residential accounts within the city of Albany in the Brilliant 100, 100% free, blah, blah, blah. Well, it says with the option to opt down or opt out. There's nothing there about opting up. I hadn't noticed that.
Well, that's because the opt-up just came the other day, right?
So that's brand new.
Okay.
how about a semicolon after offering at the end, and add, and hereby resolve to encourage those making energy choices to consider opting up to 100% renewable as available.
Could we make that a separate, therefore, so it's
A different
it
therefore?
stays where it is, offering period, and then be it further resolved,
Be it further resolved, sure.
and then have your, whatever you said. That, I think, flows better.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay, so with that change, would you like to make your motion? We'll pretend it didn't happen.
I would be more than happy to move this resolution with the changes as proposed by Rochelle. Second?
Sure, second.
Second.
No. You should get the second.
Can you
be the
poll the
second.
council, please?
Councilmember Barnes?
Abstain.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries. Good job. Thank you all for coming. Oh, we can do that. Okay, number 11-2, results of operational and organizational assessment of city's finance department, city treasurer function. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, the item before you continues direction given by the council in your strategic plan to conduct an analysis of the current function of the city treasurer position in terms of the elected or appointed status of the position. Council may recall we issued a request for proposals to conduct a organizational and operational assessment of both the city treasurer function and the finance department function. The component that you have before you tonight is specific to the function of the city treasurer, given that any potential amendments to that necessitate a charter amendment, which would be a ballot measure. You will find it attached to your staff report this evening, the results of the consulting firm analysis of the current structure of our city treasurer functions, as well as their recommendations, which are to transition to an appointed position that is consumed within the duties of the city's finance director. In terms of a ballot measure, depending on the direction of the council, the Charter Review Committee can be tasked with preparing that draft language for the council's consideration for the November 2018 ballot. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I guess I have at least one here. So it says in the report that this, if we were to go to make the finance director essentially the appointed treasurer, this would save $77,000. But I wasn't quite clear. I mean, the finance director would be, and his department would be taking on extra duties, so there would be potentially more staff time. So how, is it a straight 77,000 or is it a little more complex?
Yeah, they're utilizing that figure based on the existing salary that is provided to the elected city treasurer. In terms of the overall cost savings, that's a consultant's analysis. In terms of actual tangible savings, we'd need to look at that. My presumption would be, based on the overall analysis that we've received, there is some capacity with other staff positions in the finance department as we continue to grow the capabilities of that department over time. As the council knows, we are currently also recruiting for a finance director. So as that position grows and we find someone that would fit both roles, that is something we'd be considering over time as well.
Another question I had, you look at I don't know, was it 4 or 5 cities? But there are a number of cities in California, I believe, and even in the Bay Area that still have elected treasurers. I know Concord has an elected treasurer. There may be others in the East Bay. A lot of them are in Southern California, I think. Would the, are they less efficient because of elected treasurers by default, or is that?
I think it would be a case-by-case analysis. The jurisdictions that the consultant utilized in the analysis on this report are relative in nature to Albany, and they're also local jurisdictions. So that's the findings you have here, and indicated in that, the city of Alameda remains the one with an elected city treasurer function.
Right.
In the consultant's report, again, it indicates that the overall efficiencies would be improved because it would be one individual, whereas now it could be the finance director who then pauses to wait for the additional analysis that may be provided through the other function.
Okay.
Other questions? Do we have any public comment? Okay, I'm not sure what, would you like to make a comment? Come on up.
Someone was sleeping.
It wasn't me. I don't know.
I have served as the city treasurer for 30 years and have worked hard to ensure that our public funds were handled appropriately. In recent years, the city has begun to devalue my role as the final oversight of these funds, and I feel my professional integrity has been called into question with this report. In addition, errors that I brought to the attention of the previous city administration fell on deaf ears, so that now the city is having to deal with these problems. I do want to commend our current city manager for listening and for acting immediately to take care of these concerns. I do have some corrections that should be made to this report. On page 3, the city treasurer analysis, there are errors in the duties stated in the city charter. The first 4 bullet points are dictated by the city charter. However, after that, all but the last bullet point are dictated by our municipal code instead, and the final bullet point is incorrect about appointing clerks necessary to perform the duties of my office. I only may appoint a deputy subject to confirmation of the city council, as may all other department managers. In addition, direct oversight of finance staff by the finance director has not been consistently happening with the previous 2 finance directors, as was mentioned on page 3. Transparency of the city with the Finance Oversight Committee, as discussed on page 4, would only be as transparent as the current finance director treasurer chooses to disclose to both staff and the committee. The cost savings The cost savings noted by merging the treasurer position with the finance director are only true if the finance director, treasurer, and their staff are adequately performing their jobs. As an example, our current city manager has had to hire at least 2 temps in addition to the interim finance director recently to perform the finance duties, which had not been properly performed previously, in addition to paying for the current finance staff. As one of the historians of the City Hall, I can tell you that there were both a very good cash management policy as well as a financial procedures manual located in the finance department, both of which have disappeared during the tenure of the previous 2 finance directors. I searched the entire J drive, which is the finance drive, to find them, and they are not there anymore. So I just wanted to make those corrections. With regard to not having the ability to make electronic payments, I'm not sure whether are they talking about credit card payments, or are they talking about receiving payments from the county? If it was credit card payments, the past 3 finance directors did not want to accept credit card payments for different reasons, as well as we do receive electronic payments from the county. Every time I get a request, I fill out the form, and it's taken care of, and we start getting them that way, as long as we make sure that we get the correct report from them. That's about it. I actually have no opposition to you looking at having this position changed. I do honestly believe, with what's been going on recently, that we should have an elected auditor if you're going to get rid of the treasurer. Thank you. Let's go.
Thank you. Could we get a motion to extend until 10:45, please?
So moved.
Second.
All agreed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, bring it back to council for further discussion.
Well, I'll kick it off since everyone seems shy, or the cat has their tongue or something. I don't know. I think we should be considering this. It may be time to change things around. In this report, what I particularly liked was this idea of a financial advisory committee or oversight committee. I think that if we were to propose a change in the city treasurer, that even though it's not given as much priority as a change as essentially doing away with the elected treasurer, I think it's a great idea, and I would, if we were to put something on the ballot as a charter amendment, I think I would have that committee also be on the same ballot issue. Just how, there's a lot of questions in my mind, how would that committee be formed? Would it be appointees from the council? Very often when big bond measures are passed, there'll be oversight committees that are part of the bond measure. And they often will, particularly in transportation, there'll be a member of some property owners association or taxpayers association at the county level. Sometimes the Sierra Club will have a member. I don't know if we're a big enough city to consider doing something like that, but you would want people who are particularly adept at looking at the numbers and doing that kind of financial oversight. But definitely, I would think that if we were to go forward with this idea, that we should have that as part of any kind of charter amendment.
So are you saying that the committee would then become part of the charter?
No, well, maybe not necessarily part of the charter, but possibly. I don't know. I'd refer to the Charter Review Committee to weigh in on something like that. But I don't think we take away a treasurer's position unless we have something that's a little bit removed. In other words, our current treasurer is elected, so there's a certain independence of being an elected member of, and not part of the administration. And I think if we had a committee that was not hired by the administration, that was either appointed or, I don't know what, but, that had that bit of separation, then there'd be more transparency for the public on funding issues.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I just don't think I'd put it in the charter at all.
Well,
Keep it as fluid as possible,
when I said it wouldn't necessarily be in the charter, but I wouldn't propose that charter amendment without having the same proposal on the table, that we have something else going on.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's not a charter thing, but something else.
Right, and we could work on the language, but,
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Other comments, Rochelle?
I'm in agreement with Pete Moss's comments. I think that it was a good thing when we switched to a appointed police chief and an appointed city attorney, and this will be a good thing as well. I do want to say that I think we've been very fortunate to have Kim Denton's long and devoted service, and she has been a tremendous asset to the city for decades, and I don't want anyone ever in any way to think that this is somehow a negative evaluation of what Kim has done for us. It's simply a acknowledgement of the change in how cities are run over time. And I do have a concern about the difficulty that we've had getting the right person for that finance director job, and I think we need to figure out why and what we can do to make it, to find the right person who is going to stay. One of the things that has been so wonderful about Kim is her longevity. She has been here. Institutional memory counts. And so getting somebody who can stick with it and has the skills is going to be crucial.
Thank you for that, Rochelle. I appreciate your comments about Kim and second those. I'd also echo the comments that if we eliminate this position, which is an oversight position, that we do make a unmistakable gesture to replace it with something like a committee. That has to be part of this as well.
Michael, do you have any comments?
Yes, I think it's time that the treasurer becomes an appointed position, or let me restate that. I do think that, the police chief is no longer elected. The city attorney is no longer elected, and so I think these sort of elected officials are going by the wayside, and I don't think it's a personal comment on you. And I will say, I don't think a committee is going to be a good alternative. If we look at just the history of these bond oversight committees in this town for the various bond measures, they've really been a mixed bag. Some of them are good, some of them are not. People come and go. That's one problem. Problem two is the issues, I think, that are encountered are so far in the weeds that it's hard for people who are, meeting once a month for 2 hours to ever get their heads around those issues. So as far as the idea of having an independent auditor, we do have an independent auditor. And whether or not we can beef up that process, and the independent auditor, like for example with the CAFR, has never been super pleased with us because we've never gotten it done on time. So there does need to be a lot of work, but if we can, I don't know how other cities interact with their independent auditors, perhaps that's a relationship we can firm up. I don't know. But in general, I'm in favor of this.
Well, I think to echo what everybody else has said, that we are all very grateful that you've been such a great treasurer for so long. And I was thinking you were a treasurer before you were a Denton. So it's been a really long and fruitful career, and it's not over. So, and I think we need to work a little bit on this committee. I think something is important, and I'm not sure we, in the next 8 minutes, are going to figure it out tonight. But I do think we need to move on this because we need to get it needs to get to charter review, and it needs to get back to us to get on the ballot. So I think to send it to charter review, they don't need to analyze it. We know what we want. They just need to give us the ballot language to remove the elected treasurer piece. And I think we could work through the committee part as we go along. The other thing is we're not going to do this until 2020. So isn't that correct?
That would be the next time that the office is up for election.
Right. So we have some time in the next 2 years to work on the details.
What you're talking about is something that would be on the ballot in November that would make the position appointive at the conclusion of the current city treasurer's term.
Correct. Did you want to?
No, that was the point that I was getting at.
So with that, does that give, I think we're all in agreement? Now you want public comment?
Well, actually, I'd like to comment as a member of the charter review.
Come on up.
So obviously not speaking for the Charter Review Committee, but having stayed here through this, I just want to let the council know that the Charter Review Committee has essentially one more meeting before your last meeting, before the deadline to submit ballot measures to the registrar, and that meeting is in a week. So I'm not really sure how much can be done constructively by the committee on this topic. I mean, it'll certainly try if you direct it, but that's much faster than it usually works, or any committee or commission works, to my knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, but does that give you enough direction to, and you're comfortable about getting it to charter review next week? Is it next week?
Yes.
Good, okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're done with that item? Okay, other business, oh, I'm sorry, what?
Can I get a formal motion?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Could somebody make a motion?
It's basically item 2 that you're directing.
Yeah, I will move that the council directs staff and charter review committee to come up with that's a better word, that's a better phrase than that, draft a ballot measure to amend the city charter to transition from an elected to an appointed city treasurer.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Mayor McQuay?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, now, other business announcements. Next city council meeting will be on Monday, June 4th. And with that, we will adjourn. Sorry.
Other agenda items. I had already called for a review of fee waivers.
Right.
I would like at some point also no rush, but an agenda item about the evolution of Stroll donations over the years and accounting and fee waivers, as discussed previously. Also, I think we need an agenda item about school zones. A poor man has been coming to our meetings for many times now, and we have not had a public item to address this. And I think we deserve to speak about it ourselves and address that item publicly as well.
Okay. With that, we will adjourn. We are adjourning in memory of those lost by gun violence, remembering the students and teachers of Santa Fe High School. And with that, we are adjourned.